Friends, colleagues, dignitaries, is my microphone working? So, shh. Hello everyone, the big hand is on the 12, so it's time to open the first ever QILT Symposium at UNSW. I want to welcome all the three-dimensional people who have braved the weather to make it to UNSW today. I want to welcome all the two-dimensional people online who probably very wisely are not catching flights and things. And thank you for coming online, and we'll try to involve you through the questions and electronic things. Whenever I welcome someone to UNSW, I like to remember where I'm welcoming them to, and today I'm welcoming you to Bejugal land. So this was the land of the Bejugal people since time immemorial, and I want to pay my respect to their elders, past and present, to the students, to all Indigenous people who are here today and are contributing to UNSW and have contributed in the past. So my name's Merlin Crossley. I'm Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic Quality at UNSW. I've been here at UNSW for about 15 years, and I love UNSW and the whole sector in Australia. I also love the QILT process and the QILT data, and I'm going to give you a little speech. So I think the QILT data is a vitally important dashboard, and I would never fly in a plane or drive in a car that didn't have a dashboard, because dashboards tell us whether we're within the speed limit in my car, whether I'm low on petrol. I have a Toyota Camry hybrid. It tells me about fuel efficiency. My friend has a Porsche model, and it tells him about his tyre pressure. Plane dashboards tell us about altitude, and that's very important if you're flying in a mountainous region or over tall buildings. We absolutely need dashboards. I want to start by thanking some of our speakers, Lisa Bolton from the Social Research Centre and her team for running the QILT process so well for so long and for coming today. So thank you very much, Lisa, for all your work that you've done. I want to thank the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Education in Canberra, Ben Rimmer, for his tireless commitment to public service throughout his career and all his efforts to ensure that education remains great and is already on the right track and keeps getting better in Australia, and his support for the QILT process and coming here to give a welcoming address today. But I know not everyone likes dashboards. Some people try to denigrate the value of the QILT dashboard and even cast doubt on the validity of the student voice. Why? I think it's because dashboards seldom congratulate us on our good work. They're valuable, but they mostly point out problems. You're running out of petrol. You're about to crash into a mountain. They never say, "Well flown, you drove well," and that can make dashboards annoying. But if you use the QILT data carefully, you can find positives to celebrate as well as issues to fix. And as Andrew Norton's longitudinal data on the sector tells us, the student experience has generally increased over time, and now, you'll see today, it's pretty stable, and that's good, considering how much change we absorb in the sector. Beyond that, I actually read the student comments, not all. I've never got through all, but I read as many as I can. The vast majority of comments are hugely positive and extremely well thought out. One can find many things to celebrate, and one can keep the negatives in perspective and fix those things. And Professor Richard O'Donovan from Monash, who's here today, is an expert on analysing the data, and he'll give you a very good talk on the validity of some of this data. Chris Ryan, the DVCA at UQ, he's also an expert, and he's going to talk. Now, Chris's plane couldn't take off today because of our cyclone down here. We also have cyclones down in Sydney, we like to pretend. So he's stuck in Queensland. Chris will be coming to us online. Now, I need to reiterate that Richard O'Donovan's published on these topics that students actually give quite reasonable scores and they give valuable information. I want to thank UNSW's Nat Nixon for hosting the students. We wanted to make sure we had the students' voice, and I want to thank the students. UNSW would obviously be nothing without our students, and as university managements, we appreciate the positive engagement we have with individual students and with the student representatives. I want to just finish by saying a bit more about dashboards and feedback mechanisms. The QILT dashboard is where students judge teaching and the student experience. They give us feedback, and we academics need to see the positives and not denigrate the student voice. The students are trying to help us to make universities better, and we want that too. If there was another dashboard for us to talk about to people, it would be nice if there was a dashboard where universities could talk to people in the department, like Ben Rimmer and his colleagues here today. I think that the government, like academics sometimes, often feels that the commentary they get from university is like that coming from plane and car dashboards. All universities say is, don't do that, we're low on petrol, or we're about to crash into the mountain. Don't cap us back to 2019 levels, or well, what are we going to do with all the staff we've appointed since then, since we've grown? Please don't do that. I can see that this negative criticism from universities could be very annoying, but just as student comments highlight positives, we need to have opportunities to share the positives about Australia's higher education sector with our masters in government and with the community. The University Accord aimed to be such a process. To me, it provided a glowing report of how expanding the sector so that no one is left behind and no one is held back will boost Australia's position in the world. I love feedback, and I know the government values positive and negative feedback too because it makes us stronger. In some countries, governments are attacking universities ostensibly because of their failings, but actually it's because of their strengths. Let the attack never happen in Australia. Let us work together to build a better sector and do that using data and reasonable debate, the sort of data found in QILT dashboards. So to conclude, I thank all the speakers. I thank our students. I thank Lisa and her people for running QILT, and Ben and his staff for sustaining our sector and working with the sector to make things better. And I thank our academic speakers. Now, I've got to do the housekeeping, which is just to say the bathrooms are out the back there. There's exits here and out the back. And if anything happens, we'll just follow our instructions. I need to now probably introduce Ben. And I think they've given me so much information on you, Ben. AI is just spectacular. So we've got your whole life story. I don't want to relive Ben's whole life, but what I'd say, it tells a story that he has dedicated himself to public service in the true sense of the word, and this is very important. So, you know, he's a National Fellow of the Institute of Public Administration, a recipient of the James Wolfenson Public Service Scholarship. He's a member of the Champions of Change Coalition, or has been from 2015 to 19. 2002, he spent working to support Cape York's First Nations organisation through a secondment with Joanne. He's chair of the Australian Youth Orchestra. He's been worked with the Victorian government and had roles in the Department of Premier and Cabinet. He's a highly distinguished public service with degrees from Melbourne University. I think that's the university that ranked 20th in the world. No, that's us. They're ranked 19th. Sorry about that. So he's got degrees of law and arts from Melbourne, and he's got degrees from Oxford. So he's an accomplished speaker. I was delighted when he accepted my invitation. He was the first person I invited, and now I'm going to get off the stage to give him a chance to talk. Thank you very much, Ben Rimmer. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Merlin. That was monumentally embarrassing. I'm glad that AI stopped at that level of detail and didn't delve even further into my life history, because it really isn't fit for public consumption. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, the Bidjigal people, and also, as is my custom, I'd like to acknowledge the First Nations people in higher education who've worked hard and fought for their rights over many generations, including Professor Leanne Holt here at UNSW and also Professor Lisa Jackson-Pulver, who, as of this year, I think is the new chair of the QILT Advisory Committee. I have 3 brief tasks today before you get on to people who actually know something about QILT. The first of those tasks is to say some important thank yous. The second is to tell you why this data matters to me personally, to the department and to the wider government. And the third is to just briefly open up a bit of a discussion about how we strengthen our understanding of teaching quality and student experience and why that matters, and why it's important that those things should be even more firmly at the centre of university leadership, governance and strategy. Firstly, a thank you. A thank you to Professor Merlin Crossley for this invitation and for organising this event and for his leadership in this area. A thank you to all of the higher education providers who participate in QILT. It is resource intensive, it takes time and energy. I'm sure at times it feels a little bit relentless, and it is an incredibly valuable source of information for all of us. And the richness and depth of the data depends, obviously, on the students, graduates, employers participating and on the higher education providers enabling all of that. In 2024, there were 149 higher education institutions participating in the SES, including all 42 Table A and Table B universities and 107 other higher education providers, more than 257,000 students, which is an enormous survey undertaking. I'd also like to thank the QILT administrator, the Social Research Centre. Having this done independently of the data is, we think, important. It increases the quality, transparency and timeliness of the data produced, lowers the reporting burden, and through the SRC's work, we get this support for a culture of continuous improvement that directly benefits both the practice of individual providers, but also directly benefits the student experience. It would be remiss of me not to thank Lisa Bolton directly. I understand that effective kind of now-ish, Lisa, who is presenting later, is stepping back from the frontline duty as Director of QILT Research and Strategy. Lisa, I understand, has worked on this since 2015, and a massive thank you from me and my team to you. Speaking of my team, a thank you to my team, because they do a lot of work on QILT as well as so many other important areas of university data. It's sometimes thankless work, and I'm not only referring to Andrew Norton's commentary on our capability and performance, but Fleur de Crepigny, who's in the room, is an awesome leader of that team, and the team more generally do a lot of good work in this area. And look, more generally, I guess perhaps a gratuitous thank you to everyone in the senior lecturer in the faculty and University X who's actually looking at the QILT data and thinking about how they improve their own teaching performance, the experience of their students. It's not always easy no job is easy, but the job of being a university academic is famously challenging at the moment. Someone wrote a book about it that came out a few days ago. And from my perspective, I'd just like to thank all of the people who do that work every day to improve their own performance and that of their team and university. Why the data matter to me? From right at the start of QILT, we've been aiming to help inform student choice. We've been aiming to drive continuous improvement in teaching and learning practice. We've been aiming to support efforts by government to build and strengthen quality assurance practices in the sector. And those objectives remain just as relevant today. QILT data can be relied on to produce high-quality insights and drive continuous improvement. The SES is a massive survey. It's the largest survey of higher education students in Australia. As I've mentioned, 250,000 odd students each year, and a really robust underlying methodology and a continuous improvement mindset to that methodology and the questionnaire. And I particularly like that the methodology has, I guess, that trifecta. It's got practical insights from people using the survey methodology and involved in this research area. It's got stakeholder consultation. It's got actual research and empirical knowledge and evidence and understanding, always important. And all of that comes together into a measurable process strongly linked to learning and development outcomes, and learning and development outcomes that are able to be influenced by individual providers and individual faculty, schools, teams. I'll give you just 4 brief examples of insights that we can draw from this data that we think are relevant, and that are relevant in the work that we're doing right now today in the department supporting the government. First, and these are literally just examples. There are 37,000 different insights that could be drawn, but these are some that struck me. First, the overall experience ratings have not yet recovered post-pandemic. I think that's interesting. And they continue to show marked differences between undergrad and postgrad for some universities. That's interesting. Why is that? What is it about student experience that continues to be ranked by students in ways that is less positive than pre-pandemic? Is it a permanent change about the pandemic? Is it a permanent change about online? Is it a permanent change about the attitudes and expectations that students bring to this? Secondly, peer engagement is really in trouble and really important. It's the area of the survey that has the lowest positive ratings, as people in this room will know better than me. The highest undergraduate rating for this focus area was in 2019 of about 60%. Postgrads have improved post-pandemic, but still only to 56%. Unsurprisingly, there's a relationship between mode of study and peer engagement. And one of the things that's interesting to us is that this effect continues through. You can see that mode of engagement impact right through into the employer satisfaction survey outcomes, where graduates who studied on campus are rated consistently about 5 percentage points more effectively than those who studied externally. Interesting, given the changes in mode that we've seen. In the department, we're asking questions about this. Why is this the case? Does it matter? Does peer engagement matter? What do we do about online and external students? Can it be funded or regulated or encouraged or supported into an improvement pathway? Third is that international student experience shows that improvement is possible. International students are a very important part of the Australian community, make a valuable contribution to our classrooms, campuses, and communities, as well as our soft power in a diplomatic sense, and so many other aspects of the Australian economic and social outcome. The Australian government remains very committed to a resilient international education sector with sustainable growth, underpinned by strong integrity, and positioned to deliver a quality student experience for international students. One of the things that I regret about debate in the last year or two is that the quality of student experience for international students, and in fact for domestic students, has been a little bit absent from that debate. The QILT survey plays a really important role in this area. It gives us information. International students do rate their experience more highly around peer engagement and also around student support and services. So from the department's perspective, we're asking questions about why is that the case? What can we learn from that? If we can achieve higher performance rated by students on student support and services, given what we know about the importance of student support and services for international students, can we achieve the same thing for domestic students? Finally, on the same theme, ratings in the student support and service area have decreased year on year over the last couple of years. They're currently at their lowest since 2017, and that's a problem. That's a big problem for us. We know that student experience and student services are incredibly important. As we move more towards equity, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, the student support experience is even more important. And I understand that the National Student Ombudsman, Sarah Bendel, is coming later today. Her new role, and by the way, she's doing it brilliantly well. You'll really enjoy meeting with her. Her new role will provide a really important pillar in this support. So again, the department's asking lots of questions around this area. So thirdly, I said I'd try and open up a little bit of a discussion a bit more broadly. The Accord set a challenging objective of 80% of the working age population achieving a tertiary qualification by 2050. There's debate about that. Mitchell Institute had an interesting piece a couple of days ago about whether this is a good objective. There's debate about the extent to which that objective should be met by the TAFE and VET sector or the higher education sector, or both, or a combination, or all of the above, whether that distinction continues to matter in the same way. But let's just, for argument's sake, settle with that 80% by 2050 objective. By definition, achieving that requires strong and growing contributions, in fact, from both the higher education and VET sector. The old kind of semi-competitive mindset between the two sectors is really just a relic of a dinosaur era. The new focus is around more joined-up approaches between the two, better pathways, better linkages. By definition, achieving 80% also requires much stronger equity performance. We simply can't get to 80% attainment without 100% opportunity. And Australians from low SES backgrounds make up, on this metric, 25% of the population, but only 17% of undergraduate enrolments in higher ed. And that's not a talent issue, that's a structure issue. That's a structure of education and structure of learning issue. Australians from regional backgrounds have far lower educational attainment than those from the major cities. People in this room know this data very well. And I just want to make the link again. We can't achieve the 80% target. Let me go even further back. We can't achieve our productivity, economic and social objectives without the 80% attainment target being met. We can't achieve the 80% attainment target without joined-up efforts across all tertiary education providers. We can't achieve the 80% attainment target without a much more significant focus on equity and therefore a much more significant focus on student support, engagement and wellbeing, including in particular institutions like UNSW and many others in the university sector that are so important in the overall structure and performance of the sector. The sector knows that performance in these areas is challenging. The private conversations I have with leaders and staff and students in the sector say that it is very important and that it can be very hard to maintain the focus of university leadership, governance and strategy on improvement in this area, despite its importance. We need to do more. The Australian Tertiary Education Commission, which started operation on Tuesday, it has its own website, so therefore it's a thing, will play a big role in this area. New enhanced mission-based compacts negotiated between each university and ATEC will be expected to focus heavily on equity outcomes and student experience and work with each different provider about what that means in relation to each different provider's mission and purpose. Equity and student experience at UNSW should and will mean something different than equity and student experience at Charles Sturt or Charles Darwin or UWA or La Trobe. And the whole point of ATEC is to encourage and allow performance and differentiation across the sector in a bigger way. QILT will continue to play a very important role in this area. It'll be a major input into ATEC's work. It'll be something that ATEC considers very closely. But also, wider efforts to improve the quality of teaching and learning will be important. For example, the Productivity Commission recommended that we increase work on peer review of teaching as a continuous improvement tool. There's really good outcomes from that in the school education system. Some universities are already doing it very well. We're very interested in this area. Student assessment of teaching quality is very important. It's not the only important thing. We also want to see more systematically requiring more systematic requirements about expertise in teaching from academic staff over time. This is something that can't be built overnight. It's a structural change long term, but expertise in teaching itself alongside other forms of academic excellence is, we think, increasingly important, and the Accord final report had some important things to say about that. I don't want to understate this challenge. In my personal view, there is too little focus on these topics and too much tolerance of underperformance. I'm confident that this will continue to be a big area of focus for Parliament. One of the things that is very enlivening in my life is that every time we go near Parliament, they are very keen to talk to me about and to talk to the sector about student experience and equity performance and student wellbeing and university governance. It will continue to be a big area of focus for Parliament, I'm confident. It is a big area of focus for the government. It will be a big area of focus for ATEC and the new Chief Commissioner, the new Interim Chief Commissioner, Professor O'Kane, and it will always be a major area of focus for the department. So finally, I just want to go back to where I started with a massive thank you to everyone in this room, online and more generally, for all that you do to make QILT so effective and so important. Thank you for your commitment to improving student experience and quality of teaching. Thank you for coming today and participating in this symposium to make the whole system work even more effectively. Yes, there is more to do, but it builds off the excellence and insight that is already produced. I'm sure the rest of the symposium will be an excellent opportunity to connect with colleagues, to meet new people, to share a love of teaching and learning and student outcomes, and to work together to build a stronger and more fair higher education system for Australia. Thank you very much.
So that was superb. I just want to congratulate myself for inviting Ben, because he was the right person. I think everyone would understand that his department both cares about the sector and has a deep knowledge of the issues in the sector. That was fantastic, Ben. I mean, this thing that we haven't recovered student experience after the pandemic, this is so true. Online is a challenge. The whole world is trying to recalibrate. And I want to acknowledge the 126 people online. The people in the room today are all smiles. I hope you're hanging in there online as well. Engagement. So this afternoon, Patsy Polly from UNSW and Sarah Madison, our DVC Education and Student Experience, the whole afternoon's focused on engagement, well-being, and well done, Sarah and Patsy, for realising that this is one of the main things. That was your second point. The international experience, Ben, you're right. Australia, it's just been, we're one of the world capitals for international education. We've improved the international student experience, and let's not let the debates about rate of change and things damage that. And then it was interesting what you said about student support. And we're working on that. I'm sure everyone is. And this is examples of how sharing and debating these issues in a positive way, it's going to have huge changes. And then you mentioned the importance of inclusion and building a coherent society. I don't know if people realised I was quoting the Prime Minister. No one should be left behind. No one should be held back. Australia needs to build a cohesive society. I just want to say there has been a book saying universities are broken. It's written by someone very distinguished. It's well-meaning, but we're not broken. We're bruised. It's a tough game. It's like AFL. It's tough. You don't win all the time. We're bruised, but when we're bruised, we look at the bruises and we try to heal. We're not broken. So, on that note, I want to move on to our next speaker, star speaker, Lisa Bolton. So Lisa Bolton's the Director of QILT and Research Strategy at the Social Research Centre. As Ben says, they're an independent group which gives an independence and rigour to this massive survey. Lisa's been leading them since 2015. I think the QILT surveys didn't sort of, she's basically built them, created them. They're massive, and she's someone with enormous, a force of nature is Lisa. What does it say in my AI-generated notes? An educational professional, been working with the program since 2015. She has a very strong profile. Everyone who knows her energy and intelligence. We've got great relationships across the sector. This is the other thing. Everyone thinks the sector competes. You bet we compete, but we share all the time, and this is what makes us good. And she understands the vet and the university sector, and Ben talked about that as well. These are both important. I think Australia has struggled to get the balance right between vocational education and university. I think it's because we don't have a big manufacturing part of our economy as they do in Germany or something. I think it's a challenge for us, but we've got to get it right. And people are trying to get it right, so it's great. Lisa has a master's degree in education, leadership and management. It shows a strong education in quality. And I was absolutely delighted that Lisa accepted the invite to come. And I just also want to reiterate Ben's thanks, Lisa, to you and your team for all the work you do on this, because this information, knowledge makes us better. So, without further ado, Lisa Bolton.
I'd like to thank my mum for sending those notes to Merlin. Fabulous, thank you. I have to admit and apologise in advance that I have too many slides and I will be going through like a train. It's a sickness, it's where I go. So I was just going to talk to you today about optimising QILT to enhance the student experience, engagement and success. So we collect a lot of data at universities. We're fabulous collectors, but how well we use it is often the issue. And so I think we're at a phase now, QILT is well established, the processes are well established. It's about understanding how to use that data to actually drive decision making in institutions and to improve the experience of the students. So she says, oh, it works. So as Ben said, the purpose of QILT is to inform student choice. That's that Compare Ed website. That was one of the main government aims in the development of the project, and setting up standard instrument across the whole sector. We also, there's been talk of performance indicators for an awfully long time, but I think a lot of institutions include QILT measures in their mission-based compacts now, and I'm hoping that will continue. And TEXA also pay attention to the QILT data in relation to the SES and the Graduate Outcome Survey in their risk assessment processes, and are very engaged with the data as well. But I think the real strength of QILT is in this continuous improvement area. It's for institutions to get a set of data that they can use and use to benchmark that is relatively, she says, reliable. You can set up your own performance indicators and use it to support your own strategic directions and your own mission. So I think what I'll talk about a little bit today is what some of the data means, but also how institutions can utilise this data to meet their needs. QILT is all things to all people, and it depends which indicators you're pulling out, it depends how you're looking at it, how you're cutting and dicing it, but it's only one piece of information in a much bigger puzzle. So what is QILT? I'm hoping you all know, but I'll give a quick rundown. So QILT is a set of 4 surveys. The Student Experience Survey, which is commencing and completing undergrad and postgrad coursework students, onshore students. So it includes domestic and international. So we hit them twice while they're enrolled. Then there's the Graduate Outcome Survey, 4 to 6 months after the students have completed. It has labour force stuff, but a bit of quality stuff as well. And one of my favourite questions, which is around how well the course prepared you for your current job. It's my favourite question at this point. And all of these have comment fields as part of them. And then the GOS longitudinal, where we follow that same cohort that responded to the GOS 3 years later. That's, again, I've got many favourites. That is a very insightful survey, and I invite you all to have a look at it, because you can see what their first destinations were, but how they're proceeding over that 3 years. And then I call it our problem child, the Employer Satisfaction Survey. We actually survey the supervisor of the graduate. So that's its strength, but it's also its kryptonite, because we need the students to be giving us their supervisor details, and that's where the rubber hits the road. And so we're still working on that. There's going to be a project in the next year or two to improve that instrument and the process. That's being funded by the department, and so hopefully we'll include all of you in that discussion. So I took this slide out. It's got too much information in it, just let it... You can all have copies of these, no need to suddenly take photos or anything. But I put it back in just to remind everybody that the QILT surveys use taxi data as their data source, different to the old Australian Graduate Survey, where we used to all try and get our data from the graduations area and, oh my God. And we pull in all the demographic data that's in taxi. So that makes the quality of that demographic data so much more important, especially around trying to measure our performance in relation to the accord and the sorts of equity targets that we're looking for. And often, first in family, students with a stated disability, all of those things, often institutions are calibrating that and putting it into their systems differently. We really need to herd the cats and make sure that that data is high quality, because it's going to become more and more important in how you evaluate yourself. Further to a question I anticipate, but no one's asked yet, institutions have had their SES 2024 data since January. And so I just want to remind people they have got that data. If the benchmark data is not yet available, that doesn't mean that you can't use the data. You have time series data that we give you back, including all of the taxi information, so you can do a lot of in-depth analysis and you know your trends. So things might change a little, but these surveys are so big, it's like turning the Titanic. Thank God for COVID, it gave me something to talk about. But I think it's a slow-moving animal because it's so large, and so I think institutions can work with that data even if the benchmarks aren't available, and you can always talk to each other. So that was all I was going to say. There's a lot of words on that slide. So this is the slide that everybody gets so excitable about in the national report. And you'll note, other than those three at the top, three kind of private institutions, everybody is at around about, a similar state. And those confidence intervals are tiny. The data's quite reliable at this level, but it hides all of the detail. I would say that Charles Darwin University is a very different animal to the University of Melbourne or the University of New South Wales. And so these sorts of comparisons, while everybody gets very excited about them and they look lovely in a national report, this is not the end game. This is my... I was talking to Ben before. I used to work in an apple orchard when I was young. In the old days, when everybody was doing their own thing, yes, apples and oranges was a problem. But given the methodology of QILT, that we use taxi data as the samples, the consistency of the way the data's used and distributed, we're comparing apples with apples, but I will remind you that there are many different types of apples. You've got your Granny Smith, you've got your, the Red Gala, and the small Nashi pear that I've popped there in the corner, which is like the Jazz Institute, the Melbourne School of Photography. We have a very broad church of institutions. So when you are evaluating your own data, it behooves you to look at your own student profile, compare yourselves to people who are like you, but certainly look at your demographic profile, consider your own institution's strategic goals, your community. So a lot of institutions actually do a lot of work within their community, building industry in their local areas. That is important to have in the back of your mind when looking at the QILT data. It's not enough just to look at those headline indicators at that top level. It doesn't tell you enough. So I say avoid whataboutism. If the data's not been looking great in some areas and you still don't have your benchmark information, just waiting to say, but they're worse than us, so it's all right, is probably not a good strategy. I think we need to be looking at this data and improving our own students' well-being, experience and success. She says, so today we're really going to focus on the student experience survey because we're all about well-being. There won't be an exam on this slide. The next one is worse, prepare yourselves. But the QILT surveys have 5 focus areas: skills development, teaching quality and engagement, learning resources, peer engagement, which Ben was talking about, and student support and services. So peer engagement, student support and services were altered in the review. The overarching measures are still okay, but the underlying items have changed. So it is well worth, in the SES, looking at the item level. Don't just sit at those focus area levels. There's an international module. There's some questions about negative effects on study, financial living arrangements and paid work commitments. We saw during COVID, international students were doing it really tough, and we saw a massive increase in the number of them that was saying that their financial circumstances, living arrangements were negatively impacting their ability to study. It's bounced back. Things are good. We also asked whether they'd seriously considered leaving in the last 12 months, and we asked them their reasons. Now, keep in mind, this is August, September, when we do the collection. These are surveys, so it's mainly engaged students who will do them. It's not the students who are angry and disengaged. are less likely to be doing these kinds of surveys. So we have the engaged students, we have people who haven't left, and it's already August, September. But it's a really nice way of looking what the barriers are, what sorts of things are affecting students that are still with us. There's a freedom of expression set, a single item now, sense of belonging, which is well worth a look, and also there are comments. So there's almost 2.8 million records in this full data set. It breaks most computers when we try to do any comment analysis. It all goes horribly wrong, but it's a big, big data set. So just let this wash over you for colours. Don't get too excited. There'll be a small test at the end, but it'll be fine. These are the underlying items in each of those focus areas. But if you look on the right side, that grey set, the other areas at the bottom, one of the strengths, I think, of QILT is that it allows the sector to put their own items into the survey, and we collect it and give it back to the institutions. And in the last review, a number of institutions had said, we want questions about student wellbeing, and that wasn't something that came through in the review. And so we put together a working group, and together with the sector, we helped them design the wellbeing module. And so that includes the Personal Wellbeing Index, which was developed by an academic out at Deakin University in Victoria. But we've also added 3 other items around how stressed the student is, how well they're coping with that stress, and how well they think their institution is supporting their wellbeing. I think they're really good questions because, you know, I had a hand in it, so I'm slightly biased. That's a fee-for-service activity. The sector designed it, the sector collect it, and they use it themselves. The department doesn't get it because it's a sector-driven thing. But it's a fee-for-service one, but a lot of institutions have come on board for it, and I'll show you some of the outcomes. So the SES, as Ben said, she says, you can see the exciting dip in 2020 over COVID. And as Ben said, 250-odd thousand responses, 37.5% response rate. So what I will say, it's my little soapbox moment, the engagement of the institution drives the response rate. We can probably crack 30% on a good day through all of our badgering, through the emails and all the rest of it. But really it's about the students believing that the institutions are using that data and that it's important. That drives the difference between a 28% response rate and a 60% response rate. We've had some institutions get up to 60% response rates because they've built this into their planning, because they engage with the students about the results of that data. That's what drives it. It's a bit of a proxy measure for engagement, I think. So we can see that before COVID, the results were a bit higher. What we saw during COVID was that it was mainly students who had expected to study on campus who had been kind of forced into online through the effects of COVID and not being able to be on campus. If you look at the external students' results, they barely budged, stayed the same, because they expected an external experience. That's what they got. Life was good. The students who'd expected to be on campus and have that on-campus university experience, engaging with their peers, engaging with their academics, that's where the numbers dropped. And maybe, as Ben indicated, why they haven't bounced back quite as much as we might have hoped. So this is a little word cloud. These are just basic correlations. It's nothing statistically clever. I just ran the correlations of all of the items in the survey against the overall educational experience. And unsurprisingly, the items under that teaching quality and engagement set were the ones that correlated most highly with the overall experience. So I just say associated with. I'm not saying one's driving the other. But also you can see, this is for undergraduates, sense of belonging was the 7th most important or 7th highest correlated item. So it is important to students, that sense of belonging, and then we can talk a little bit about what might be associated with that. But it's also some of those skills development pieces around problem solving and knowledge of their study area and work readiness. So there are things that are associated with that overall experience over and above just teaching, but these are the ones that landed at the top. So then in a fit of excitement, I took that single quality of teaching item, because there's another satisfaction type one. So the overall quality of teaching they'd received. And again, unsurprisingly, the yellow and orange bits, they're all the teaching items that sit in that focus area, which you'd expect. But interestingly, there's some other things like the quality of the online learning materials. So learning materials and textbooks are also important in what students are thinking about when they're talking about quality of teaching. And the sense of belonging, that little pink one off the side, is still in there. And if we look at the percentage positive, so positive agreement with sense of belonging, it's not moved by much, and it's really low. And I remember back in the old days, because I'm much more elderly than everybody gives me credit for, I think, the old AGS in the CQ had that question about sense of belonging, and it used to attract that same level, 50%, 40-something%. It's not high. But what we do know is that students who rate their sense of belonging positively also rate their educational experience much more highly. Not saying one's driving the other one necessarily, but we can see that distinction. That sense of belonging seems to be an important part of their experience. And so here we go, she says, word cloud fever. So sense of belonging, quality of the overall educational experience was the highest associated. But look at those student support areas, induction and orientation activities, study and learning support services, career development, financial, legal. They're the student services items that Ben was talking about. They are important. They're important to foster that student sense of belonging, and also there's a teaching item called, which is here somewhere, teaching staff actively engage students. During COVID, a lot of student comments talked about that they were expected to get into groups and work with people that they'd never met. They didn't know them. That they'd be in an online Zoom class, pushed out into a discussion group, no one would turn on their cameras. They'd all sit there quietly going, oh, and then bounce back into a central room and just continue on with someone reading some slides. That wasn't working for them. So those sorts of institution-mediated student engagement activities are quite important. But do remember as well that this is the whole sector. When we look at individual institutions, that's a little bit different. So I did a word cloud for another institution just recently, and those peer engagement items actually came to the fore. And they're an institution where they have mostly internal and multi-mode students, not much external, and we saw those peer engagement items start to really come into the fore around this sense of belonging stuff. Students need, she says, again, this is my soapbox, students need to develop their professional networks and their academic networks, and we need to be fostering ways that students can do that. Where students study exclusively online, we see that their development of spoken communication and working with others' skills are lower. When we used to have those questions in the GOS, they remained lower for external students, and we see that same decrease in those collaborative learning skills in the ESS. So we need a way to ensure that we are still teaching the skills that are important, even when we're moving into more of an online space. The other thing to note, here's some differences in the groups. With the sense of belonging to the institution, you'll see students with a disability have consistently rated their sense of belonging to the institution less highly than students without a stated disability. In that second one across the top, you'll see internal or mixed mode. You had that dip during COVID, and that's what I was saying. Those external students just doodle along without much change. Later year students, generally angrier than commencing. They get a little more jaded as they go along. But international students' sense of belonging has always been higher than domestic students, particularly because international students, who make up now something like 58% of postgraduate coursework responses to the SES, are more likely to be on campus, internal students, because that's the requirement, and they are more likely to be dependent on the institution for their social, their community needs, their cultural needs, their equipment needs, and safe places to study. So they tend to gravitate much more to the institution, maybe, than domestic students who may have external networks that they can rely on. But also we see that for postgrad coursework in particular, about half of the domestic students are external and only about half of them are on campus, and that we would compare. So when you're looking at your postgrad coursework results, when you're analysing your QILT information, they're different animals. So just looking at that as one big homogenous group is not going to get you the information that you need. So in terms of comments, I'll just give you one. The social aspect. Students need to be better socialised before undertaking group projects, as many people are apprehensive or entirely against working with others. I went with contentious ones. The program could set more collaborative assignments to improve students' ability of working with others, which flies in the face of we all hate group work. I mean, we've all heard it. It's the big furphy. Well-designed group work that is not high stakes is a really good way to involve students in these kinds of collaborative activities. Capstone projects, all of those things. We need to think about how we do that when students are not necessarily together physically. So just looking at that considered leaving item, which I talked about, again, remember, it's August. Those people with the transition problems early on probably already gone. But we saw during COVID that went up quite a lot because students were not necessarily getting what they expected. But you can see here that international students, those rates are much lower. That may be an underreporting because it's higher stakes for an international student to admit they were thinking of leaving because of visa restrictions and all the rest. But if we look at the reasons that they considered leaving, we can get a sense of what the barriers have been, what is giving them the thoughts of leaving. And we see stress levels, mental health and financial difficulties are the three top reasons for undergrads to have considered leaving. And they're pretty high up as well for postgrad coursework, but I didn't do it, but I probably should have. But for postgrad coursework, who are at a different stage of their life, they tend to be older, a lot of them are external. Those study life balance and paid work responsibilities actually start to come to the fore. But there really are too many people who say that their course expectations were not met. And so I think that that's an interesting finding that maybe people can dig into a little more. What did the students expect? Because if we don't ask them, we don't know. And it might not be what we thought. So moving beyond that, and because we're focusing on wellbeing, I've put some stuff in here about that wellbeing module, which not all institutions do. It's a sign up if you're interested, does incur a cost. But what we have in there are a set of, I think there's 7 of those personal wellbeing indicators. The life overall is a single item that they answer, and that personal wellbeing index score is around that aggregation of those 7. So you see it's things like standard of living, safety, achievement in life, etc. Not things that you're necessarily responsible for driving, but it does give you a sense of who your students are and where they might be having trouble in their life. And what we find is that, for example, undergrad students with a higher personal wellbeing index rate their educational experiences more positively. So there's something going on with those students and their wellbeing and how they're rating their experience. We need to pay attention and help those students to get a better experience of their study. I put the sense of belonging, even though it's not a focus area, I just whacked it on my own personal one. And you can see if they've got a low personal wellbeing index, they are much less likely to say that they feel they belong in the institution. So there's some really interesting analysis that institutions can do with their own data to really start to dig into this. So these were the 3 items that we looked at about stress. So how stressful is the student experience, the higher ed experience? How well are you coping with that stress? And does your institution support your wellbeing? And you can see that those students who had considered leaving, which I've broken this one down by, a much higher rating of how stressful, very stressful or extremely stressful. They also are more likely to be saying they're not coping at all or only coping a little. And they're also more likely to disagree that their institution supports their wellbeing. So again, there's a group in amongst your students who are considering leaving, and it's worth having a look at these items to see who they might be, where it might be best bang for your buck to put your energy. So students who didn't feel like their institution supported their wellbeing did have much lower ratings of their educational experience. So you can see it's a similar one to that considered leaving. There are groups that are answering the SES that are having more trouble than others. The trick is to find them and to target your activities to give you the best bang for your buck to be able to improve those things for them, because that will we hope the numbers work, that will improve whether your students have considered leaving, whether they're rating their experience well. So here's too much information on a slide. I would have failed one of my students, but here we go. This is my piston engine, a colleague used to call it. One of the best ways to deal with this sort of performance data and indicators is to build it into your systems as an institution. So you'll have a strategic planning process in your institution, and you'll have a lot of plans. You might have a learning and teaching plan, an industry engagement plan, a student success plan, student engagement plan. A lot of institutions now have a student experience director that looks after certain areas. And when you're working out those plans, you'll have indicators for whether you're being successful in what you're trying to do. The best way to deal with the indicators that you're getting through QILT and other unit surveys, for example, and other data sources, attrition data, progression data, all of that will come into those plans. You then feed those over into your operational plans. So you might, for different areas, depending on how they're performing and how you would expect. Males are always a little unhappier than females in how they rate these things. You might give a slightly lower target for your engineering or computing boys compared to your health areas or your teaching areas. But you build your targets using the items within these surveys that actually are measuring what you need them to measure. So if your institution is mainly internal, you're bringing in more and more external sort of modes, so all the lectures might be online, and the students are not happy with that because they're saying lecturers are just reading off the slides. I'm not saying this is necessarily anyone here. Just reading off the slides, there's no engagement with the academics, the students don't know each other. That's the area you might decide to target in your indicators as one to monitor and set improvement targets through your institution. You can't do everything. That other slide that I made you memorise showed, there's a lot of items in the SES, and there's the graduate survey as well. You build them in there, but you also build them into your academic governance processes. So course evaluation, course improvement processes, build it into there. You'll be reporting that through to your academic boards or senates, and both of those mechanisms will report to your boards. And so this is the way to integrate this sort of information to make sure that your institution is using that data and people are paying attention to it. but they're paying attention to what they need, and you're telling them the story of how they're going. So the last one is, you can have all the dashboards in the world, but if it's just a schmozzle of everything, that's not helpful. You really need to engage with the data, choose the indicators that meet your strategic directions and what you're trying to improve, and building them in. And it might be a different dashboard for different faculties. It might be a different approach. And I'd also encourage everyone to look at those comment fields, because they have a richness. I'd also remind you that a good response to a survey is sometimes more research. So you might get a score that you're surprised about. Bring in your students for a focus group and find out what they're talking about. Read the comments, because that's a really good way of deciding what questions you might investigate in a focus group. So I saw Merlin's got a microphone. So that's your last slide? Yeah, that's my last slide. Here we go.
So Lisa's right. We have got time for just 2 questions. We're going to have a time from the floor and a time from Slido. So we've got this latest technology here. It's hashtag QILT Symposium, QILT Capital, Symposium Capital 2025. You can go onto Slido. I'm going to give you 1 question from Slido and then 1 from the floor. But first of all, thank you for all that stuff. So the question from Slido, Lisa, and this is a great question. How do some institutions manage to achieve 60%? How do they embed this? How do they get their message across? Because we do care, but we don't get that, and we're not getting a message across.
Well, the institution that I've got in the back of my mind, it was a while ago, they had hats. They went out to the student engagement activities, barbecues, etc. They did that for their students and their staff. And they built it into all of their strategic planning processes. Every area had percentages or, improvement targets that they were aiming at, and the staff were talking to the students about the results. And then the students don't feel like they're shouting into the void, because there is nothing more frustrating than shouting, saying your feedback and never hearing anything about it again. And unless your students think that you are using the data and you are acting on it, they're not going to keep filling these things out, because they're quite onerous, a lot of them. So they need to know that this data is important, and they're contributing to the university by giving you that feedback.
That's terrific, thank you. And that's what we will do. We do some already. We've got a few hats. Any question from the audience, from the people here? 1 question. Everyone's too shy to ask the first question. Well, that's okay then. We're going to let you off.
Thank you.
We're going to let you off.
With
Thank
1
you,
minute.
Lisa.
Thank you.
So look, someone's let me near the microphone again. I'm just going to grab the opportunity to say how important early release of the benchmarking data is. It is vitally important. In reality, what happens is half of our university community, so QILT released the data, our institutional data. Half our university community ignore it because they don't have any controls. Half get excited because we've gone up 0.5% in X, Y, and Z, and we report we've gone up 0.5% in X, Y, and Z, and then we discover that across the nation people have gone up 2% in X, Y, and Z. So it tells us exactly the wrong things. Let me give you an example. It would be like RFK Jr. in the United States saying, oh, the number of deaths of COVID have halved even though I've banned vaccinations. And then he finds out that the rest of the world have eliminated COVID deaths. Absolutely. You celebrate the wrong things. Release of the benchmark, and TEXA always tells us we need external benchmarking. It is vitally important. And, if we can do it, we could be talking today about our 2024 data, not the 2023 data. And the idea we can talk amongst ourselves, I tried to get that going, and my colleagues at other universities said, no, we're not allowed to. So it'll be great. So through these discussions, we can discuss that today. There might be some questions on Slido coming through about that. But enough from me. let's go to our next speaker. Now, I've foolishly come up without my AI and team-generated notes about Professor Richard Donovan from Monash University. But I'm going to tell you, I came across his work because our own Nicole Santalin, who's a major player in the QILT and My Experience surveys at UNSW, knew him because her and Keelan George, who was with us and is now with Macquarie, with Rawdon Wilkinson, the DVCA, who's now here, who's here at Macquarie. So when they were here, they went and talked to Richard because Richard O'Donovan is an expert on educational research and data, and he wrote this fantastic paper about it. And Nicole brought this paper to my attention. I like reading papers. It's one of the best papers in educational research I've ever read, and I said, we have got to get this guy. So I wrote to him and sent him an email and said, will you speak at our QILT Symposium? And an email came back within seconds. And I think it said, I'm on sabbatical and won't be answering my emails. And my heart absolutely sank. But he did answer, and he is here. So thank you very much for coming out of your sabbatical or whatever to speak to us, Richard.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to head off a technical complication by using my laptop. Okay. Thank you for the kind words, Merlin, and thank you for the interest. I am going to talk a little bit about the sort of topics that I did cover in that paper that Merlin was very kind about. And so I should forewarn you, there are 21 slides. So watch that in the magic number down in the bottom and you'll be able to see just how much longer you've got to endure it. There is going to be an element of audience participation. Now, it is anonymous, so I will ask you, if you have a handy device, please get it ready, because I'm going to ask you to put in some things on a website, which I'll talk about in a second. Okay, so, and I've just discovered it's quite awkward having a laptop down there. I'm going to bring it up here. And that is all working, that's good. Okay, so, as everybody is very clearly aware, student evaluations are becoming really pivotal in higher education. And it is a way for us to tap into getting feedback from just what are students' views on what we're delivering. And so it's really started to feed into performance evaluations of academics, and it's started to become an integral part of promotion processes and probation at many universities. So it's not surprising that academics will have questions and concerns about what we at Monash call SETU, so Student Evaluation of Teaching and Units, particularly when there may be factors that are completely beyond their control. So Lisa sort of pointed out that male students on average tend to be a bit harsher than female students. So if I've got a class full of males and Merlin's got a class full of females, then he might look good relative to me just by virtue of the cohort that he's addressing. So that's a really important concern, and there are other things as well. The same thing applies to international students, domestic students, etc. So there's a whole bevy of factors that can shape the way an academic looks, if you like. And so it's understandable that they have considerable concerns, but this has sort of been researched and a lot of effects have been found, statistically significant effects. And so that then beds in this, to some extent, paranoia about, well, you know, how can I trust SETU? How can I believe what it's telling me when it may have all these other things that are skewing it one way or another? So what I wanted to do today was to just go through and explore a few of these concerns that people have, some of the more popular ones, and just to see to what extent they actually hold sway within the data. Now, if you do have a device, and if you're playing at home, if you could navigate to pollev.com/Richard, hopefully you will see something come up other than a blank screen. So it's just pollev.com/Richard. I'll give you a moment and I'll wait until I see at least one person go, Oh, yeah, I've got something. Oh, that's a thumb up. All right, that's good. So what I'd like to ask you is, what are the kinds of factors that you've come across or that you're aware of or that you particularly think might actually influence these sort of SETU results? So if you could just type in a couple of things, and we should start to get some of these popping up on the screen. So gender, cost of living, global conflict, mental health, timetabling, core subjects, financial, gender of the staff member, course structure, staff sex, student sex, non-English speaking background, politics, academic preparedness. Wow, there's a lot shooting through there, so I'm guessing we've got quite a few people online who are contributing as well. So gender is definitely the top one there at the moment. Unconscious bias, discrimination based on demographic backgrounds, etc. So yeah, none of these are shocking. They are carefully researched in the literature. And so fortunately, we're going to be having a look at a couple of these now. All right, so there is a lot of research, but it is quite mixed. And so I'm going to, the analysis that I'm drawing on today is from 2022. It's Monash data that was used for this. So the dashboard is kind of, we're coming down to about 1,000 feet. We've been sort of up around 30,000 feet at the national level, I guess. And so this is now just drilling into some of the stuff around one university. And so that may or may not be representative of trends at other universities, but this is definitely what we've come across. So the 5 things that I want to have a look at is, do strong negative feelings dominate SETU? So is it a case that students who are angry are the ones who predominantly respond? And, you know, you kind of get this sort of almost like a revenge review thing happening. That might be from students who fail, for example. So is there an effect from the unit size? Is it just that, well, I've got 500 students in my unit and that's why they mark me lower, whereas somebody else who's got a nice little boutique cohort of 5 students, they do much better. I've got exams. Students hate exams. So, of course, they're going to hate the unit, they're going to hate me. So is exams a major factor? And then the last one, which was one of the most dominant ones there in the previous exercise, is there racism and sexism behind a lot of this and skewing things? So we'll dip into these 5 and that's what I'll get some feedback from you from. But first of all, again, stats warning. Now, apologies to those who are statisticians and experts in this area in the room or at home. Not all of us are, but I think it's important for us to be clear about some of the basics around stats. And so, in particular, people talk about statistical significance, but often we forget to talk about effect size. And so I just want to recap briefly, so bear with me if this is all very old hat, and I'll just try and do it in as helpful a way as possible for those who have just gone blank and turned off because I said the word stats. So, as we know, there are p-values, and within social science, we typically will accept something like a p-value of less than 0.05 as indicating that we can be confident that the effect that we're seeing isn't just some random fluke, that because that group of people that we researched, they just happen to be that way. So it's not just a random effect. And we're saying that there's about a 1 in 20 chance that it might be, but we're saying that we're 95% confident that this is a real effect. However, statistical significance does not mean practical significance. These are 2 very different things. And so it's very important, particularly with SETU, to bear that in mind. Now, Cohen went to a lot of trouble in the 60s and the 80s to try and capture that idea. And so there's this thing called Cohen's d and eta squared. Again, don't need to remember that, but they are a way for us to be able to do something beyond just having a p-value. So having a p-value less than 0.05 is fantastic, but you don't want to just have a small effect size, or necessarily even a medium effect size. Ideally, if you're trying to understand things, you're looking for factors that have a large effect size. Again, it depends on the context, but Cohen gives us a way of being able to assess what is the effect size. And so if it's about 0.2, like if Cohen's d is about 0.2, it's small. If it's less than that, it's tiny. And the eta squared is slightly harder to work with and slightly more annoying. So 0.01 versus 0.06 versus 0.14. So the general kind of principle here in a fortune cookie nutshell version is you want your effect size to be big and you want your p to be tiny. So the smaller the p, the more confidence you are that you've got a real effect. But the bigger the d, or the eta squared, then the more confident you are that this is actually a major effect. Okay. So for example, Bandari in 2020 did a study of 13,000 people where it was a weight loss study. So they had a particular treatment and they discovered that their treatment protocol worked and they had a p-value of 0.01. So that's fantastic, right? So they can be 99% confident that it's not just some random effect of the group that they worked with. But the d, Cohen's d, was less than 0.1. So the effect size was trivial. So what we actually saw was that the control group lost 10.6 kilos and the treatment group lost 10.7 kilos. Because it was such a big study, 13,000, the numbers that you've got in your study reduces your p-value, but it doesn't increase the d. It doesn't make the practical implications bigger. It just means that you can be more confident that you can identify an effect. So in this instance, the treatment worked, but it was only negligibly better than the control. So this is the kind of thing that we want to be looking at and bearing in mind, particularly when we're talking about getting feedback from students. We don't want to necessarily leap to the conclusion that just because we've got a statistically significant effect, that it's a practically significant effect. Okay, so just again in that nutshell, statistical significance tells us that there probably is a difference between the groups, but the effect size captures how big that is. Now, last little toot on statsy things, charts. It's really important how we present data. So for example, drawing on some of the family, first-in-family data. So in Monash, over on the left here, these are the students who are first in their family to attend university, and these are the students who are not the first in their family. So, and on the left here, this is the student satisfaction with teaching scale that we use, which is derived from QILT. So this looks like there's quite a big difference there, right? So you can see a lot of fresh air between the bottom of this error bar and the top of this error bar. So this is a statistically significant effect. But if we zoom out and actually look at the full scale, this is how we should present this data. And this is real data. And a lot of people will get worked up about the chart on the left and they will just not pay any attention to the chart on the right, even though there's the statistically significant difference, right? But the Cohen's d for this is 0.06, so it's a lot smaller than 0.2. So this is the kind of thing that we need to bear in mind. And again, in fortune cookie land, may your chart scale be full and avoidably deceptive, right? So we want to try and show as much as we possibly can, and charts are a much better way to look at things and get a sense of what's going on. But only if we show the full scale. Okay, so back to pole EV land. if you go to your device again, you should see a question coming up in a second about, do you think that student evaluations are dominated by students with strong negative feelings? All right, this is just a simple yes, no, or I can't guess. Ooh, no is really rocketing ahead there. Maintaining a very strong lead. Some people can't guess, but one slightly disappointing thing is I can't actually see what the raw numbers are here. So we've only got the percentage, but that's good. So we can see that, well, we've got around about a 2/3, 1/3 split happening here. So about 2/3 of the room are saying, well, not just the room, participants. We're catching up. I spoke too soon. So, all right, we'll call that around about a 1/3, 2/3 split. That's not bad. So about a third are saying yes, strong negative feelings do dominate student evaluations, and just a bit over half are saying no. And the longer we leave it, the more people are thinking that it's a yes. So I should just let that run a little bit longer. But time is against us, so I won't drag that any further. Now, one way we could investigate this is to have a look at a chart of SETU responses. And again, an important thing to do with this is to be clear about, well, if that's true, what do you expect it to look like? Right? It's a little bit too easy to just dive into data, have a look at it and go, oh, it looks like that. Well, then I guess it means this. Whereas if you just stop and first of all have the discipline of going, well, what should it look like? Right? This is what my intuition is. What would it look like if that was true? So one plausible version of that would be this, right? So we might expect that there would be a lot of low scores and very few high scores if we've got SETU being dominated by negative feelings. So we should get a chart that looks something like that, plausibly. This is what it does look like. And you can see that it's virtually the mirror image. Right? There are very many high scores. In fact, a huge number of the highest score you can give, and relatively few low scores. So this is very skewed data. And I've noticed this in QILT, I've noticed this in all the SETU data throughout all the years, I've noticed it in other institutions where I've had the chance to look. We get very positive results. Students are, on balance, overall, very happy with the kind of thing that they're experiencing at uni. Now, if that's the case, then what's going on down here is of real concern. Like, we should be asking ourselves, well, hang on, if this huge number of students are really, really happy, then there must be something going on down here. It's worth investigating. We can't just dismiss it as they hate me, or whatever, they're male, or they're domestic students, or whatever, right? There's something else potentially going on, because there's a lot of males, there's a lot of domestic students, all responding up in this end as well. So it tells us that there's something buried in this data that we can extract and use to improve things, not just dismiss it necessarily. So the conclusion I would confidently say about whether SETU is dominated by strong negative feelings is no, it's not. In fact, if there are strong feelings, if anything, they're positive ones, not negative. Okay, back to your devices again. Do you think students who fail units are more likely to complete SETU surveys than others and give that kind of revengey review where you failed me, so 0 for you? I wonder if this is going to be a similar pattern. It's interesting. We start off with a big jump of no's, then the yeses start to creep up. We've still got around about single digits percentage of who can't guess, double digits now. Obviously, I don't call horse racing. But, okay, so we're still sort of, we're in this sort of 2/3, 1/3 zone. All right. So let's have a look and see what the data tells us. So again, one way of looking at this is to actually split up the response rates by grade. So this chart here is a little bit annoying. The colours are the grade bands. So whether a student failed, so in Monash that's an N, whether they passed, which is a P in orange, C for credit, D is distinction, which is green, and then high distinction is the blue. And so this chart represents, on the left, what percentage of those students who got those grades actually completed the SETU surveys. So you can see here that those who got a distinction or a high distinction, a bit more than 50% completed it, so that means that a bit less than 50% didn't. But what we can see quite clearly here is that the students who failed are very underrepresented. Nearly 80% of the students who failed didn't complete the SETU survey, which is really important information. So, one, it tells us something about, so are they just bashing us because they failed? Well, that only represents 3% of respondents. So that's not that big an effect. But they're the ones who perhaps we really need to hear from, right? Maybe we're just getting a rosy picture here, because if the majority of those who did well, who got distinctions and high distinctions, if they're the ones we're hearing from most, then maybe we're not getting the full picture. And so maybe there's work that needs to be done to try and tap into the voices of those students who have failed and find out more about their experience, and maybe, there's something there that we can do to help them not fail. So this little chart on the left here is the overall frequency. So again, you can see by far the majority of those who got distinctions are the ones who complete the survey. Now, there is a statistically significant effect here, right? P less than 0.001, so that's tiny, right? So there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that this is just a random effect. And so we might expect then that maybe the kind of scores that are being given are like this over on the right. So again, this is just a hypothetical trying to think through, okay, well, what would it look like? So we might expect that, well, yeah, those who fail, they're going to be more negative than those who got a high distinction, right? So that's that kind of glossy view version. But if we actually look at the data, it looks like that. So, and that is explained by the fact that the eta squared for this, again, is tiny. It's 0.007. So it's not even a small effect. It's a trivial effect, right? Very tiny. And so whilst we can see over here that, okay, well, if you zoom in on this and you go, well, look, these are all below the dotted line, the fails, and oh, this is all above the dotted line, where the dotted line is the average, then you can get obsessive about, see, they are more negative. But the average is like 80. On average, the kids who fail, or the adults, the students who fail, they're giving an on average result of 80 out of 100 to the teaching. So this is again important to be able to step back and wonder, is that actually a practically significant difference? Do we really mind that those who failed gave an average of whatever that is, 78, versus others who gave 80? Like, is that big a deal? Particularly in this kind of work where you're talking about vague senses of satisfaction. So it's really important to be able to keep your feet on the ground and recognise that actually maybe there's nothing to talk about here. Maybe this is not a relevant difference worth spending any time on. Okay, so conclusion, are students who fail more likely to give revenge reviews? Well, the evidence is pretty clear that no. They're underrepresented to begin with, but even then when you look at the feedback that they do provide, it's virtually the same as everybody else. Statistically significant in difference, but practical significance is non-existent. Okay. Do you think that educators in large units are rated lower than those in smaller units? So this is always a controversial one. What do you reckon? Yes is right out of the gate at the moment. So 2/3 are saying yes. Ooh, more than 2/3, nearly hit 70%. Very few people can't guess this one. Well, we're still coming back to about 2/3, 1/3, but in the opposite direction this time. All right, so let's take that as broadly speaking, the expectation is that the bigger the unit, the worse the result. Okay. Now, so at Monash we had, and I'm sure most universities do have, huge variations. So our unit sizes range from 1 to nearly 1,500, and the average was 260. So to do this analysis, it's much easier, I guess, and the human brain can digest it if we chunk them into deciles. And when we do that, then unit size, if it's having a large effect size, we probably would expect this to be the way the data would look. That we would think that the bottom 10%, the smallest 10% of units, would be doing quite well, and the largest 10% would be doing less well, right? So we would expect this kind of downward slope where we're saying the bigger the unit, the worse the SETU score. And if we run our ANOVA test, then sure enough, P is less than 0.001, so there is a statistically significant effect. But once again, if we have a look at the data itself, then it looks like that. And we're kind of back in the realm of the students who failed. Right? There's virtually no difference there at all. All of the scores are very close to the average, with the lowest, fair enough, down here, for the largest 10% is just under 80%, and the smallest is maybe 85%. But the difference between 80 and 85 in terms of student satisfaction, I would argue, is not that much. So, are educators in larger units rated lower than those in smaller units? Not really. Now, there actually is some difference here when you do a faculty by faculty analysis, right, which is interesting, and it's more pronounced in some faculties than others, which perhaps suggests that it's not about size of unit, but maybe the teaching techniques that are used and the strategies that are used within those different faculties in those larger units. Okay. I think, oh no, this is the second last one. Here we go. So exams. Do you think that exams influence the results and that you end up with a lower result if you've got exams in your unit? Everybody can guess. That's good. We're 70-30 split. Some people can't guess. But we'd stabilise around about a 70-30 split. All right, let's have a look. Okay, now, so a lot of academics are concerned about what impact the exams have, and particularly the timing, because when we run our SETU surveys, often it's during the exam period, which is arguably going to exacerbate the problem. Now, there is a statistically significant difference here. All right, so you can see over here on the right that units without exams are up here and units with exams are down here. Again, lots of fresh air between the bottom of that error bar and the top of that error bar. So definitely statistically significant at P less than 0.001. But again, if we zoom out and we do the chart the way we should do the chart, then suddenly it looks like that. And again, you can see that the D, Cohen's D, is 0.06. So it's a trivial effect size. And in terms of timing, we could look at when students completed their survey and when the exams are running. And so the green squiggly line is the one that doesn't have exams, units without exams, and the red squiggly line are the units that do have exams. And so this is the number of days since the student feedback survey opened. So it ran for 5 weeks, I think it was. And so this is what were the averages on each of those days. And you can see that they're pretty much the same, right? So there's no real difference there at all in terms of the timing or the scale, the size of the difference between the results. So are units with exams rated lower than those without exams? No, there's a negligible effect, right? So there is a statistically significant effect just because of the size of the sample, right? We've got hundreds of thousands. All right, last one. Sexism and or racism. Does it have a significant effect on SETU results? There's been a lot of work in this area. Got a few can't guesses. 2/3, 1/3-ish. And I've got a red blinking light telling me I've gone over time. Apologies. So I'll cut that off there. 2/3, 1/3. All right, let's have a quick look. Now, there are a lot of studies that have reported concerns about bigotry in terms of the impact on these sorts of student feedback surveys. And the expectation and findings have been that women and academics from non-English speaking backgrounds, which we kind of use as a proxy for race, if you like, that they get scored lower systematically. So the hypothesis, if you like, for this is that female non-English speaking background educators will score lowest. Female English-speaking backgrounds will score lower, but more than those with non-English speaking background. Males with non-English speaking background will score lower than males of English-speaking background. So we would expect this kind of pattern, if you like, in any sort of effect that we're wanting to see here. Now, of course, you might find that racism is a more dominant effect, in which case then having the non-English speaking background is going to be more of a pull down more on the scores, or it might be sexism might be a more dominant effect. So in which case, whether male or female swamps the effect. And so you kind of have roughly one of these three patterns that you might expect to see, right? So it's sort of definitely lowest for female non-English speaking background, definitely highest for male. All right. Now, there is a statistically significant effect. P is less than 0.017. But literally, there is no effect size. So if we look at the data, there it is. So are SETU teaching scores impacted by racist and sexist attitudes? At a systemic level, no. Right? At least at Monash, at least for this year. Students did not differ in any discernible way on the way that they rate staff from different demographic backgrounds. And just as a slight quirk, if you do the thing I said not to do and you zoom in, then we get a slightly unexpected result. Right? It actually looks like that, when we were thinking it was going to look more like a dotted line if there was an effect. So the highest rated were female non-English speaking background academics, and almost the lowest was male English speaking background. So this is a very strong concern that's in the literature, and so it's really interesting and important to interrogate the data and to move beyond just looking at whether it's just statistically significant or not. Because that is a statistically significant effect. It's just not a practically significant effect. So just to sum up, you know, we're fortunate and can draw some comfort from the fact that those concerns don't seem to be happening at Monash. And so we can have confidence that the SETU data is valuable and reliable. But we do have to stay vigilant, right? We can't just ignore that there might be, one, obviously, concerns about the effect size, but also there can be local examples and instances of biases, right? And the thing is that if there are local instances of biases, of bias, you can detect it in the data and you can correct it. So we've been implementing what we think is a robust approach to SETU in recent years. So we've developed an integrated evaluation framework for teaching and unit design. We've built scales. So one of the really significant things we've done is move away from single questions. Single questions are not psychometrically valid. We can't rely on a single question to give us the kind of validity that we want, given the importance of this data. So if we're going to use these data well, we have to make sure that we're measuring it the best way we possibly can. And so we've developed RASH-compliant scales for diagnostic scales so that you can actually get actionable feedback from students. And then we check for bias. So we look at the faculty level to see, are there instances of racism and sexism at work here? And if so, then we use techniques to weight the scores before we report back to staff, so that they can then have confidence that any of those concerns are not influencing the data that they're receiving. Okay, thank you very much. Apologies for going over time. I don't know if we've got time for questions or whether there are any, but thanks.
So that was fantastic. You should be a university lecturer, Richard, and you should teach. I don't know if you're looking for a job, but that was fantastic. We're a little bit over time, but we built in quite a long lunch break, so I'm relaxed about it. I really enjoyed your presentation. I think it's interesting. I read a book once that said that what people learn at universities, if you learn Spanish as an undergraduate, you tend to forget it unless you use it. But if you learn statistics, it gets used throughout your entire life, because again and again and again, understanding something about statistics and probabilities is really valuable, and it can be useful for people. So I think it's terrific. There's an excellent talk about statistics and the use of it. I've got a few questions on Slido. Apparently everyone has to use Slido, so sorry for trying to encourage people to be, I don't know, to talk from the room. So there's a question here that I get all the time. I can just say UNSW, it started when Rawdon was here. Rawdon's now at Macquarie, but we looked at, and Keelan George looked at the sexism and racism. Our data is exactly the same as yours. Some statistical significance because the sample size is so big, but the spec size is absolutely tiny, and in some faculties, females perform statistically significantly, but tiny amount. So it's exactly the same. And so I went out and said, I'm not racist. And actually, every time you say that, people jump to the conclusion, you are racist. So it's a very hard message to get across. And one of the questions is, these data at the university level, but can you use, is it safe to use the data to inform decisions about things like promotion?
Well, the important thing is to get good data. And so if you've got good data, then if you trust the methods that you're using to collect that data, just as we do in every other area of life, that's what science is about. It's about working out how do we collect the best data we can to inform our decisions. And so I would go back to, particularly with staff promotion, if you're, and you know, I've had scores down in that area where they've locked me out. Okay, so just as well. If you remember that first graph, if the scores are low compared to everybody else, there's something going on. And so I think that needs to feed into our... We should be curious about that as educators. We should be concerned about that, and the university should be concerned about that. And so, to the extent that being an educator is an important part of being an academic, then it's an important part of promotion.
Yeah, and I would say, so I'm responsible for promotions at UNSW, we would never use one piece of data. We have a 10-page application, we have narrative, we have bits about context, and we've got, particularly in our educational staff community, a rich array of events, a calendar of events, many opportunities for people to show their prowess in education in many different ways. And we also have visiting fellows, people can go on fellowships. We've got all sorts of things so that it's not just the computer says yes or no for promotions. But the student surveys, we do look at them, but we look at them in context. So that's an answer there. There are other questions here, Richard. I'll just give you one more, because one was just a comment. The comment just says that when we say students are happy, perhaps it's acquiescence bias. I think that's right. I mean, there is a bit of acquiescence bias, so I think that's a comment. But the question, so yeah, it's really important to encourage low-performing, academically performing students to respond to SET. Is Monash trying to do that? How do you do that?
It's difficult because often the reasons for, and again, well, I mean, we've run focus groups with students who fail and things like that. And often it's actually life. Life is getting in the way. That's why they're failing. So they've got so much going on outside of university, beyond anything that we have any control or say in, that they will fail regardless of what we do, many of them, because there's just so much going on. Yeah. So, but it is important to then go to that next level and to find out. You've got to talk to students, you've got to find out what's going on, and then work out, well, are there supports that we can do that might be able to help them? You know, is it financial? Is there something that we can do in that area? So there's lots of avenues to engage with them, but you can't just rely on surveys because they're too busy with life to complete them. They're too busy with life to even pass. So we have to reach out in other ways and be more creative in that space.
That's terrific. So look, I think I'll finish there because that was the end. You've answered all the questions. We're going to have a morning tea. I just forgot one thing. I didn't thank my team for organising this. Merrilee, Nathaniel, Nicole Santalan, everyone who's done this. It's an extraordinary thing putting us together, and you'll be able to taste it in the morning tea. So let's start at 11:15. So we'll have 27 minutes for morning tea, if that's correct, or 23 something. Thank you.
Thanks.
Everyone at home, quick, finish making a cup of tea if you're joining online. There's 150 people joining online. Every single one of them silent, not talking, they're paying attention. So please come back and take your seats in this magnificent venue because the show is continuing. And the next session is a session where we actually do listen to the student voice. So it's absolutely terrific. Thank you, students, for coming today and sharing your insights with us. And we have the magnificent Natalie Nixon, who I've worked with for many years. Natalie.
Thank you.
I'd never do this. I'm handling Natalie my computer so she can do the questions and answers and everything. So Natalie works in Sarah Madison, the DVC Education and Student Experiences team. Natalie's been supporting the student experience for a long time at UNSW and working steadily and intelligently to try to make things better for students. And we do care a lot about our students, and we gradually do get better, but we get better because we listen. So we're going to be listening now. So Natalie, I'll let you introduce everyone and I'll get off the stage. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Merlin. We have 5 students here this morning. We had asked for some student volunteers, and I actually couldn't choose between these 5 because they're all so stellar. So I wanted you to have an opportunity to hear from them all, and I want to do a brief introduction for them before we jump into the questions. So firstly, here to my right is Anya. Anya is a third-year psychology student and was recently appointed, I think just this week, as the chair of our student union ARC. So big round of applause to Anya for becoming the ARC chair. She's previously held roles as the secretary of Philip Baxter, which is one of our residential colleges. And I asked for some interesting facts or information from the students. And actually, Anya said that one of her most memorable moments was her very first day on campus, where she met friends who she now lives with 3 years later. So I feel like that's a really good story for us, that O Week went well for Anya. We've then got Diego, third-year computer science student. He holds a really important volunteer role at UNSW, which is the Wellness Warrior Officer role, which mobilises large cohorts of student volunteers to deliver wellness programs and activities for our students throughout the term. I asked Diego what his most memorable moments was, and he said his involvement in the student-led 24-hour fundraising initiative for the Sydney Children's Hospital, where they do activities over a 24-hour period to raise money, and that includes not sleeping in the 24-hour period is part of that. So well done, Diego. Reem is a fourth-year psychology marketing student and is also a wellness warrior along with Diego, and is also a second-year UNSW student ambassador with our Future Students team. She joins us with a wealth of experience in speaking engagements, having spoken to educators and students all over the state in her UNSW ambassador role. She is so busy that organisation and time management has become one of her number one skills, she told me, because once she was triple booked, was how busy that she is. So well done, Ree. Then we've got, let me just turn my page, team. Then I've got Janeth here. So Janeth is a third-year economics and econometrics student. Alongside this, he's also an extremely engaged and multi-talented contributor to our community, either currently holding or have held ARC Program Officer Volunteers for the Volunteers United Program, Treasurer and Sports Director at UNSW Sri Lankan Society, and a Senior Residential Tutor or RA in our Warren College. An interesting fact that I loved about Janeth is that he's also a self-professed retired professional backyard cricketer, which I love. Finally, we've got Ada, is doing her PhD in marketing and has been at UNSW for 3 years. She currently holds the role of president of our postgrad council, so it's great to have the postgrad voice here today. And she also holds alongside it, as if that isn't busy enough, the role of the president of the Chinese Students Association here at UNSW. With her passion for marketing, she also has a passion for events and student engagement, and she's worked with more than 250 students in the Chinese Students Association to deliver more than 70 events in one single year. So if that's not an event manager or a marketing manager in the making, I don't know what is. Well done. All right, team, I'm going to jump into our questions. So I'm going to start with Diego and Ada and ask you this question. What aspects of your learning experience at UNSW have been most impactful for you?
Okay. I start? All right. I think just for me, I'm speaking from my experience as a comp sci student. And I want an exchange on another university in Canada, so I can kind of compare the two. But I think UNSW really likes teaching application-based. So I feel like the way they teach you really teaches you how to be a member in industry, right? I can say for my university that I went on exchange on, I kind of just did like 2 midterms and I wrote like 4 papers and I did like 1 exam. I feel like they really like dove into a lot of the theory and I did understand it. But I feel like a lot of what I was like learning, I was like, I'm not really gonna do this or like use this outside of, you know, university, right? They're teaching me to be a researcher, not like an actual, you know, member in industry. But I feel like in UNSW, just for my assessments, I feel like the vast majority of my classes have just been labs, 2 assignments, and then an exam. But I feel like the way, just because we are literally making something in those assignments, and I feel like we actually work towards a product and we learn by doing the thing, I feel like I was able to learn a lot better just from here.
That's great.
Yeah.
So do you feel like it prepares you more for going out into the world, finding a job, getting that real life experience or real world experience?
No, yeah, 100%. I can say specifically for this one class I did last term, it was specific on front end web development. Right. So it's just like basically just website building, right? Yep. Where you put like all the text and like images to look nice. And I realized, I was like, wait, I can like make my portfolio a website. So that's what I did. I'm like looking for internships right now, but basically I just link my website as my portfolio, right? And then I feel like it's just a good way to show off your skills. And I feel like I actually like learned something that I could show off like really easily to people.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
I feel like you're going to have lots of students knocking on your door now to build their portfolios as a website.
Oh, it's not. It's a work in progress. Yeah.
Thanks, Diego. Ada.
I'll talk about my PhD experience. Although we don't have a lot of coursework, like undergrad students, we do have a lot of different activities and learning experiences complement our academic journey, such as meeting supervisors, writing papers, proofreading our thesis. So, for example, every single month we have professors from all around the world coming to UNSW to do seminars. Usually complementing that seminar, we also have like a one-on-one section with those professors. On top of that, we also have like workshops hosted by professors from different universities as well, such as like difference in difference analytical methods. So we have a lot of learning opportunities, I guess, beyond only working with the supervisor. And I guess on top of the academic part, what I love about learning at UNSW is the wealth of opportunities available, because I remember in my first year I actually attended a lot of different programs such as Research Makes Impact, HTR Employability Program, Employability Awards, and also HTR specifically, they have a lot of different workshops for us. So I guess on top of working with professors and being connected with people within our faculty, we also have a wealth of opportunities to learn about what is actually out there and what is the recent research topics, and be able to connect to professors and academics around the world.
Thanks, Ada. I really appreciate that. We might move on to question 2. So this is for Reem and Anya. How well do you think UNSW supports students who are struggling academically or personally?
So I think academically, UNSW has a lot of initiatives that help out students who might struggle. So we've got peer mentors, so one-on-one mentoring. But you also just have, I think, one really good thing about UNSW is because of, for example, I do psychology, so a lot of my lecturers are actually researchers and world-renowned researchers at that. So they have interest, they have passion in their topic, and I think sometimes I talk to my friends in other universities and they really struggle to sometimes connect with their lecturers because they find that the lecturers are just wanting to do their lecture and then leave. So I think one thing I'm really happy about UNSW is that I've never felt afraid to go talk to my lecturer and ask for help because I've never felt like they won't help me. So I think UNSW does really that well academically, and I think personally there's a lot of great initiatives on campus that I think just do a little bit to help you. Sometimes you can't do everything to help a student, but every day we see how much harder it is for students in this day and age to try and go out and get an education when they're struggling with money and they're struggling with mental health issues. So I think small things like, for example, the food hub we have here on campus, which gives pantry items to students, or even just the community who are struggling, or just little things like during exam periods, in the library there'll be food available for students who just need a bit of a pick-me-up. So I think little things like that can really help, and you don't realize it, but a little thing every week helps you get through the trimester. Yeah. So I think that was really good for UNSW. Yeah.
I think that's a really good takeaway. A little thing every week can help rather than perhaps one big thing.
Exactly.
Just those little interactions or little interventions can be really helpful. 100%. Thanks, Anya. Raheem.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. We have really great lecturers who are researchers, but we also have tutors that really want to see you succeed. Like, I'm so sorry to my statistics tutors, but I send an email crying to them every week and they still respond to me. But yeah, and exactly what Anya said, having that little thing every week, kind of like what the Wellness Warriors do with our activations. We try and destigmatize mental health, kind of open up the conversation around it. And we have a lot of lollipop moments, so that's really cute.
Can you tell us about those? What are the lollipop moments?
So back when I used to volunteer before I became an officer, honestly, a lot of the time when you volunteer, you kind of forget the interactions that you have, and you just feel like you're going through the motions every time you come to volunteer. But then you have people that come up to you and they're like, I actually saw you 3 times before, and I remember you giving me this, and I remember the conversation we had, and that's really heartwarming to see and hear. And now my volunteers go through that, and I love to hear it. As for academic-wise, we also have mental health connect as well for well-being, which was very helpful. And our like student support advisors, I find that really helpful as well. I think the main issue isn't that students aren't aware of it. I think because we're in such a competitive space, people kind of just push through things without wanting to ask for help or not knowing when. So I think it's more of a barrier for themselves rather than what UNSW doesn't offer.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you, that's a really interesting question, and I'd love to hear from any of you, because I wondered, so it's not a lack of awareness, you think it's actually a lack of, what do you think that barrier is in students for reaching out for help? I'd love to hear from you all.
Yeah, I think UNSW, like, because it's such an amazing uni and because you honestly meet such amazing people and everyone's in a different like walk of life. I can be in one of my classes and everyone is in a completely different stage of life.
Right.
And I think having that like subconscious comparison between you and your peers is what makes you feel like, oh, I should just deal with it. This person is going through something harder, or this person actually has a harder degree or class than I do.
Right.
So I think that's what stops people from reaching out and actually talking about it.
Yeah.
Because they think, oh, well, everyone's in the same sinking boat. So.
Okay. Yeah. Janeth, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's, at a subconscious level, a lot of people like to say that, oh, I've got it more rough than you. And that could kind of act as a barrier for people to seek support. I think a lot of the support that UNSW offers can be accessible, but it's just that people might have might be hesitant to take that initial step. In my experience, living at a UNSW accommodation, I think it's easier to break that barrier down because you're around the students, and even as an RA, you get a lot of training. A lot of mental health first aid training, a lot of catch-ups, and so it's easier to go and have that connection with people you might feel are struggling in that space.
Yep.
But when you take it at the university level, you have all these students, it's kind of hard for people to check in. So I think that's where the connections that you make really matter, and your mates around you as well.
Yeah. There is a question at the end about one thing that you would change, but I'm actually wondering if we could bring that forward and talk about it from the mental health space, because I think that's probably something, sorry there, I can hear that's a bit loud. I think that's something that we're probably all interested in around students and mental health and how we can support you. So how could we help you break down that internalised barrier of seeking help? What could we do to help you with that?
I think, sorry, I just jumped in there.
Please do.
I think that from my perspective is UNSWs and unis in general in Australia have a lot to offer, have a lot of initiatives, staff and faculty want to help, and students want the help. But I guess the issue is that barrier, right, that bridge, and it's like, how do you cross that bridge? For example, when I lived at college, one of my friends, he got concussed playing footy. And because he's an engineer, so he was constantly doing his laptop, doing labs, doing coding. And so his concussion, which was supposed to heal in like a couple weeks, went on for like 4 months. And also because he kept playing footy. He's an idiot. He's a footy player, like sometimes it doesn't work up there. Yeah. So, and the issue is he didn't even know if he was allowed to go for ELS.
Right.
Because I guess sometimes the issue is students are really stubborn. Like, unless it's in their face flashing, they sometimes struggle to ask for help, just like Janeth and Reem was saying. Because in Australia as well, I think in general we struggle to ask for help. We think if we ask for help, you know, we're not qualified enough, or like, you know, if you do it roughly, or if you do it without asking for help, somehow you're doing it better.
Right.
I guess, like, you know, if I don't ask my tutors question, I guess I'm better than the next person, but you've probably actually you could have gotten a better grade if you asked for help. So I think it's all about how do educators, how can it be really clear, look, we want to help you and this is what we're offering you, and how can students actually, you know, kind of get over that ego and actually ask for that help. And I think, for example, in the end, that friend was able to get ELS, but it took him way too long to get it. And if he had maybe just asked for help, or if he had just, I guess, known, but I don't think it's anyone is in the wrong there. I think it's just how Reem and Janeth was saying, it's just how do we go across that bridge, and how do we work together to make it more clear, look, we want to help you, this is what we're offering you, But I think sometimes it's hard in such a big uni like UNSW. So many of the initiatives kind of get, I guess, lost in like the cracks of it all. So I guess it's trying to make it clear and trying to make it more accessible, I guess.
Thanks. Reem, did you want to add something to that?
You also mentioned something earlier, Anya, where it's like a lot of people actually aren't aware of those services as well.
Yeah,
they could be a third year and you'd mention something and they're like, well, I didn't know that existed.
Exactly. I think definitely like, you know, now I'm in this role, I'm getting to know all these services, and when I mention it to my friends, oh, do you know UNSW did this? No, I did not know that. And I think it's a shame, right? Like, you've been at this uni for 3 years, and you don't know all the amazing things the uni does. But I think one of the issues is because we've come out of that post-COVID, everything's kind of digital, everything's hybrid now. Sometimes we're really struggling to make that connection with the uni and struggling to make that connection with the faculty and the staff and the lecturers and the tutors. And I think sometimes the issue isn't that they don't want to, right? Like, tutors and lecturers want that connection. It's just who's going to take that first step. So I think that's the struggle I find.
I really like that. I feel like I've taken it. Sorry, Ada, you go for it.
I actually have one example to share. What I think about the information barrier is I think actually student councils and student societies actually is a very important role in bridging that information gap. So one example I want to share here is last month the Chinese Student Association actually did a Mandarin speaking health information section. So what did this idea come from was because we talked to a lot of students, international students, and we realized a lot of them actually do not know how to actually book a GP consultation. They do not know how to use the medical insurance, and they do not know all the excellent health services available at UNSW, which is for free. So we actually reached out to the health services department, and they have been so supportive that they invited one Mandarin speaking staff from each team, such as mental health, and then we have health services, we've got a GP, we also have student services from Nucleus, and ARC also sent one of the wellness officer to our seminar as well. So it was a very great outcome. We have around 70 students actually came to the seminar. So I guess from this experience, I realized that student councils and societies have a very important role in bridging the information gap.
Thanks, Ada. I think the few things that I've taken away is that there was a really nice piece you said about who takes the first step. So do students, do us in the classroom, who takes the first step? And some way we encourage the first step to happen. A bit more around normalising asking for help. And also I think, how do we get more information through students, through people like yourselves in really great roles to actually access more students? Sort of some of the takeaways I would have from all of that. So thank you. We might move on to the next question, if that's okay. So this question, we're going to go with perhaps Diego and Janeth, if we can. So how connected do you feel to your faculty, cohort, or the broader UNSW community? So really we're asking about probably your sense of belonging and anything you can share around that.
I think I can probably share a lot, because obviously, like Reem and I, we're both like wellness warriors officers, so we're under ARC. So ARC is like a separate kind of like company from UNSW, but it's really affiliated closely with it. And ARC basically focuses on like the student life in UNSW, right? I feel like ARC at least gives a lot of support for like student clubs, for student like volunteering programs. I know specifically, I can talk about my personal experience. I feel for some of the clubs that I've been in, I know ARC literally gives money to clubs for students just attending their events. So like what happens is that this club holds an event, and they have, I think it was $2 per person. Yeah, they have $2 per person come in. All you have to do is just take a picture with your club's banner to show it was an event that was happening, and they will literally give you $2 for every person that like attended and is in that photo. So I feel like in that sense, ARC gives a lot of opportunities, especially for smaller, like maybe hobby societies, to actually go on and like take risks and like hold these events and have like bigger budgets for things they actually want to do. Even with like merch launches, I remember like for a really small society that they was launching merch to raise money from one of their initiatives. They didn't really sell that well, but ARC reimbursed a portion of it. So I feel like just in that case, like the financial support that they have for these like smaller societies really like gives a lot of space for students to just share like what they're passionate about, right? To actually like participate in these societies and these faculty societies as well. I feel like for my personal sense of belonging, I feel just the fact that these clubs are so like supported by ARC and by extension UNSW, I think the society scene and the volunteering scene in UNSW is probably one of the best that I've seen. Because I don't think a lot of other universities have systems in place like that. So that's one thing that I really like appreciate about how UNSW does it, yeah.
Thanks, Diego. I wanted to ask you, when you've made those social connections, how have they translated into the classroom for you? Or have you had to make a different connection when you've got into the classroom?
I'll be honest, I think I definitely made different connections. Because I feel like in the classroom, at least like with the amount of time that we have in our shoots, not to mention we're not there like every week, the connections that you make there are kind of just like transactional. I feel like I have made a lot of friends there, but we only necessarily, they're not like outside friends, you know that term. It's kind of just like you're there to talk about like schoolwork and they're like, oh, what is the next assignment due? Or like, when is this due? And then the moment the exam happens, you just like cut contact and you say hi in the hallway, but that's pretty much the extent of it. I feel like it's just the nature of having a lot of like different, you know, classes, a lot of different people in one place, not to mention you're only there for like maybe 8 weeks at a time. That's the only time you see each other, versus if you get involved outside of classes, I feel like, you know, you're there for the whole year. You have like actual incentive to like participate in everything. Yeah.
Thank you. Janet?
Yeah, I do echo what Diego says. I do think UNSW does a great job of ensuring that sense of belonging in the community within the university. I do wonder if that is as successful within faculties and cohorts. And that you could even tie that to the question of mental health that was raised before. Maybe there is a way to integrate that sort of check-ins for mental health within your academics, within your tutorials, within your courses. I do think there's a space to do that. The sense of finding your tribe within your cohort or your faculty might not have necessarily been as successful as the initiatives that we do through ARC, through clubs and societies, through accommodations on campus colleges. It's just amazing the amount of support and the sense of community and sense of belonging that you... you definitely do leave UNSW and come into UNSW feeling that you're part of the community, but does that translate to your faculty and to your cohort? It depends. Certain disciplines within the UNSW community, like medicine, maybe comp-sci to a certain extent. I think just because of the regularity of your classes, you're forced to make that bond. But I do think there's a discussion to be made on bridging that gap within your faculties, and whether is there a way to make that standard across all disciplines at UNSW?
Thanks, that's a great question. I just wanted to say I've got one question in here, and I've got one more to ask the panel. So if you have any questions for students, please jump into Slido now, and we'll have a little bit of time to do those. Thank you.
I just wanted to add on to both their points. I completely agree with like finding your tribe. I think I came from such a small like bubble out in the West, and when I came here, I was genuinely so scared. So I was very scared and nervous. So like the first 2 years, I would literally like go to class and go back home.
Right.
But when I started volunteering, that was like a big eye-opener for me, that there was a place for me.
Yeah.
And as like a student ambassador as well, there's so many different spaces where you definitely belong. Like we have the Nuragili campus, like little area. We have the International Center for Students. So it's so many like little things to talk about. But I do agree with the faculty-based thing. I think it depends on your program. For example, when your classes run more regularly, you get to actually keep your friends for longer.
Yep.
Whereas for something like psychology, you're all on kind of different wavelengths. So I might see you now, I might see you next year. So yeah, I think it's like that.
I thought you were making a pun about psychology then, being on different wavelengths, but that's okay.
Same, yeah.
No, and also, sorry, just to add on to what Reem is saying, because I also do psychology. I think one thing I really struggled with is psychology is obviously very interesting, but in first year, I would be in tutes where I was the only one actually doing psychology.
Yeah.
And that was really hard because I would be in tutes with like 50 medical students, 30 commerce who were just doing that as an elective, and great for them, but I was like, I want to make psychology friends who I will actually make friends with over the next like 3-4 years. I think as well what Janet was saying is one of my housemates who I live with, she does architecture, and because that's like a 5-year degree and it's the same people for those 5 years, she knows every single person in her degree, and I was like, I do not know that. Yeah. There's like too many to name in mine. But I think when you have those classes where you've got like group assignments, or for example, it's people you've seen in your classes before, they're core classes, like I hate psychology stats. Those were like the bane of my existence, but I had the same people in those stats classes for the 3 years, so at least we struggled together. And now they've become my outside friends. So I think those type of classes really help, and whilst group assignments can sometimes be a struggle, I think they really do. If you have good people in those groups, you really do make like long-lasting connections compared to, I think, the normal like 10 hours in one try where you just see them an hour and then you leave.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, a few questions have come through, so I'd like to maybe jump to those. There's one here which looks really interesting, which says, have you ever been in a class where you really did feel a sense of belonging and part of the community? What was the secret sauce for that class to achieve that?
Can we throw it back to stats where we're all suffering together?
Yeah, exactly.
So you want
shared
to be
suffering is a
suffering,
secret.
No.
I think that built the community.
Yeah. I think just how Diego was saying earlier, if you feel like what you are doing is important, and if you feel like you can actually utilize this in the outside world, then you'll feel that sense of community. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. I remember I did a general elective, which was just on public speaking, and I just did it because I was like, this is going to be easy, and there was no written assignments. I just had to do 3 speeches. But because I felt like it was something I could actually utilize on the outside, even though there was no one who did any sort of degree similar to mine, I felt like it was really a lot easier to make a connection in that class. Or for example, I'm doing a class right now, which is another general elective, which is I'm designing a playground for the Australian Maritime Museum. And I think that one helps me a lot because I'm actually working with the museum. So like how Diego was saying earlier, you've got that application part, right? I'm meeting with these people every week and I feel so important, and I'm like designing even though I have no expertise in the design area. But because it's something that I'm seeing, one, that I see the progress every week, and 2, I'm seeing how this is going to be utilized in real life, I feel like I'm making a difference. Even if it's a small thing, in someone's world, I'm making a difference. And I think that's where you can really make those connections. And I think that's the secret sauce, wanting to make a difference and having those classes to show you, look, this is how you can make a difference. Let us teach you how you can make a difference.
I like that. Dear, because you've given us an example, I might move along if that's okay. Reem, would you like to share an example?
Of?
Just as the secret sauce of a class that you felt you were really connected into.
I think it's very similar to what Anya said. I think it's when you're actually creating something that makes you feel like you're being more impactful.
Yep.
Yeah, I think with psych, it's a bit hard because you're mainly learning theory through the first, your undergrad. So you don't really have the application down, but you still learn so much. And I think psych is a lot of the time when I talk to high school students, they think, oh, I'm doing psych, I should become a therapist or a psychologist. And I love breaking that down and saying, you actually don't. There's so much different places you can go, and psychology is so flexible. So having that breakdown as well is nice.
Excellent, thank you. Janeth, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I definitely think group assignments without having people who are dead weight is going to help. That really.
Have you had a lot of those?
No, I'm joking. No, but yes, I think from the university side, having a lot of group assignments and not being pick your own group, you actually get assigned randomly to a group of people. I think that takes away that bias.
Yeah.
And incorporating that into a lot of courses, I think could help form that sense of belonging, that sense of having a tribe. And just saying that I think that's the only area that we could improve on. A lot of the other areas at university, with the community, with the clubs and societies and ARC and everything like that, I think we've found that we've hit that level. But yeah, maybe just a bit of improvement in that area.
Thanks, Jenna. Now, Ada, I'm conscious it's not coursework for you, but is there something from the academic perspective that has been a bit of a secret sauce for you to help you feel a sense of belonging?
I feel like the question will be phrased as the secret sauce for us to actually come on campus. Because PhD students, we usually work individually, and usually just in front of the computer the entire day without anyone next to us. I guess our school did this job pretty well, so we have like PhD lunch every term, and every year we do have like end of year celebration with all the faculty members. And I guess I'll bring in some of the student council perspective as well, because I'm the president of the postgraduate council. So every year we do this event which we call Research Awards, which is supported by UNSW, GRS, and ARC. So they're very, very supportive, both financially and then professionally. So we actually invite all our PhD students to nominate their supervisors, to nominate their faculty members, to nominate their peers, if this group of people actually, does something beyond what is ordinary. So we really encourage people to build a sense of belonging through coming to our event and nominating their peers, their supervisors and fellow faculty members.
That's lovely, Ada. It's a really nice way to finish, actually, that you try to work together to create the sense of community, both with the students or the candidates and also with the academics. I just, on behalf of everybody here in the room and also online, I just want to thank the 5 of you for coming today, volunteering your time and sharing honestly your thoughts with us. All of that always helps us to improve what we do, both in the classroom and outside the classroom. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nat. Thank you, students. I just want to say what an important organisation ARC is. Anna's the president, and Ada and the students are involved. I've known the presidents, the chair of the ARC board for many, many years. They've always been exceptional students, and that organisation, and Shelley Valentine, who runs it as well, it adds a value that academics can't add and professional staff members can't add, because you actually have the insights, and we're enormously proud of you, and you always invite me to the ARC dinner, which is nice. Thank you. So we're going to go to our final speaker now, so I'll let you go off the stage to a round of applause. It's wonderful seeing so many students, more than come to most of my lectures in person. So our final speaker, Chris Ryan from UQ. So there's 2 things to say. Chris is an engineer by training, but also with credentials in education. He has really hit the ground running. He started at Monash and now is the DVC academic at the University of Queensland. The University of Queensland has had a remarkable commitment to the student experience for many, many years. I'm not sure when it started, but I saw it there was a Vice-Chancellor called John Hay, who was an extraordinarily distinguished scholar. He was a professor of English. He was at Monash, then moved to UQ, just as Chris did, and he established a culture of teaching, or built on a culture. He may not have been the first. And UQ was one of the large institutions that actually did very well at the student experience, and Monash actually has always done very well at the student experience. So when we were planning this symposium, I thought I'd get in touch with Chris. And I particularly wanted Chris Ryan because of his being an engineer. He's very adept at analysis of large data sets and numbers, and he also sees the value in those numbers. So once again, I've forgotten my notes about Chris's distinguished career, but take it from me, he's won numerous awards, and he's a star in both education and engineering. He's online. He tried to get to the airport. His flight was cancelled. He tried again, and his flight was cancelled again. But nothing will stop him. He's going to appear online. So hopefully, I never quite trust online, but fingers crossed, everyone. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Merlin. It's so wonderful to be spending time with you here today, and I'm so very, very sorry that I couldn't make it. As Merlin has noted, 2 cancelled flights very early in the morning, and I'm hoping everyone in Sydney and the Greater New South Wales area is safe and well with the weather events that are occurring. I think a lot of what I'm going to talk about today extends a little bit on what we've heard both from Lisa, from Richard, and also from our students. But I'm going to focus predominantly on a tool that I've been developing with some colleagues here at UQ to really unpack the qualitative feedback that we get from the QILT SES data. Now, to do this presentation, I'm not sure how well this is going to go, folks. As you say, the technology can sometimes be against us. We're going to have to blend somewhere between 1960s technology and 2020 technology, because whilst I'm online, I need to be able to say next slide, please, to be able to move to the next slide. So next slide, please. Fantastic. So let's have a look at some of the initial considerations, and we've heard them today. And I was so delighted, Richard, with your comments, not just about ensuring that there was a statistical significance, but a practical significance, and be still my beating heart when it comes to drawing graphs appropriately and making sure that the y-axis is appropriately scaled. For the universities, we typically think of our quantitative data as fairly large data sets. They're not when you consider other data sets out there, but when you consider it from what we rely upon, hearing our students' voice, we've got a very large data set. We've got significant detail in the student demographics, and I think we were just hearing it then from our students and their experience, their personal experience at the University of New South Wales. Each of them have their own personal lives. Much of that demographics is captured. And that's a really important thing that we can cut through and find out about students from different backgrounds and understand what their experience at university is like and distinguish that from other students as well. We do have some challenges when we're evaluating the impact of double degrees. And here at the University of Queensland, about a third of our domestic school leavers are doing a double degree, so that's quite a few. And then we end up with a bit of a problem. So for me, I'm always trying to work out who on the ground in the university I can provide good data to and ask them in a process to be able to act on that data. Sometimes, as Lisa's pointed out, that's about asking students for more data, so that might be saying to them, look, just get a focus group, please. But we really want to drill down and get good data down to that discipline level. Sometimes with the QILT data, though, we end up with an issue that statistically we don't get significant, don't have statistically significant quality in the discipline level data that we have. And so that then leads us to our analysis, which is often restricted to the institution or at a large faculty level, rather than trying to drill down and understand what's happening with a particular program. Next slide, please. When we look at the qualitative data, we have a similar kind of problem. There's a large number of comments. So here at UQ, as you'll see in just a few minutes, we've got annually about 12 to 15,000 comments. They're unfiltered, and so there are some concerns there about the psychosocial safety. And they're also discipline specific, and as we've heard today, degree stage specific. So I've just created a very simple plot of my thinking of this. If we think about the 45 study areas that our students are studying in, and then we also think of those students being commencing students or completing students, domestic or international, low or high SES, we can see that we've got a large number of communities. And we've also got a large number of comments. And the trick has been to try and identify which comments should directly engage with which community. And so then the analysis has often then been restricted to the institutional level. Now, if I think about some of my colleagues at other universities, I know some of my colleagues at my level will read every single comment that comes out of the QILT survey. And the problem that I have with that is, yes, but how are you then drilling down to understand what's happening at a particular faculty, school or program level? Next slide, please. So if we bring those two things together, we often have a bit of an issue at managing this data at the university level. The quantitative data may not be statistically significant at a discipline level, and so then we don't drill it in to be showing heads of schools, heads of departments, their data as best as we could. And that tends to also mean that we restrict the qualitative data as well, because we tie the qualitative data to the quantitative data. So the purpose today is to demonstrate a different approach, which we're using actively at UQ. Next slide, thanks. So just my observations of universities, where do I feel that we excel? I think we really excel at the quantitative analysis, and we really excel at comparisons. And we've heard that through the conversations today. We've seen the data that Lisa, for example, has shown. I have no doubt at all that we're really, really good at that. Next slide, thank you. Where we can improve, if we could get to the next slide, where we can improve, thank you, at least in the perception of our students, is in the listening, the synthesising and the responding. So my focus today is really on that second one. So we might go to the next slide. So that's our focus today. And one more slide, please. Thank you. So how do we develop a dashboard? Well, we started from some really basic concepts, and it's important that we think of these basic concepts right. The first is that we need to navigate quickly a large volume of qualitative data, and we need to be able to drill down on that large volume of qualitative data. The next thing that I've asked for the team at UQ to do is to provide what I call a multi-level systematic coding across multiple disciplines. The coding is a qualitative coding, and that will allow us to have a consistency in developing our theories of what we're hearing from the students, and then from that developing meaning. And then the last part that we've been doing is ensuring that we're integrating our work into the governance processes that we have at UQ. So if we could go to the next slide, please. This slide does talk a little bit about the evaluative methodology when it comes to qualitative data. So we collect the data and then we have to code it. Now the coding, as many of us will have done, we're subdividing the comments, we're coding them into themes that we can agree on. There's typically some expert analysis that reviews and defines the intent behind each of those themes. And so then we have a sense of what the common themes are coming from our students. Then we develop some theories. So we're looking at some cause and effect here. What are some of the fundamental causes that have come from our work with the coding from the comments? And then we start looking at perhaps some questions similar to Richard, your work, where we look perhaps at the demographics of the students, and we would compare our findings with quantitative evaluations. And then finally, we're constructing some meaning and some recommendations. What's going to be our approach, our response to this work? Next slide, please. So one of the tricks that we have across a university, if you think of all the different communities that we need to be considering here, is how we do this consistently. I want to be able to have the same conversation down to a school level for every single school at the university. And the proposition that I'm putting here is that we should and could be able to use what I refer to as ethically employed AI to do the three components on the right-hand side. Certainly with the coding, it's possible to be able to do that through large language models, but then also to develop some of the theory if we tune our large language models well, and then perhaps even being able to construct some meaning and some recommendations on next steps that we would like senior leaders across our university to undertake. What I mean by ethically employed, we are not just using an open AI tool. We're using a tool that keeps our data confidential, it's not learning from our data, and it's not taking any of that and providing it to the greater world. So it's in that closed environment. The other part that we're doing as well is ensuring that our data is connected with the policies, procedures, etc., that are available at UQ. So in a sense, that's enough talking from me. I think it'd be worthwhile for us to be able to explore the dashboard. So let's go to the next slide. So, and just to say that, Merlin, you were very kind in your introduction of me, but it's been an absolute team effort to be able to bring what you're about to see to life. So let's go to that next slide. Now, Merlin, you were very wise in saying to me, Chris, for goodness sake, don't try and show a live dashboard. Instead, let's go with some images and some videos. And seeing as I wasn't able to make it there personally, I think that was a really wise decision. This on the screen now is our dashboard. And just as Lisa has offered, I'm very happy for these slides to be shared with you all if you would find that of interest after the event. What you can see on the top, under where it says Student Experience Survey, it says Overview, Subtopic Analysis, Feedback Table, etc. They're different tabs, and you can go through the tabs. What you see just under that are some filters. Now, we've chosen those filters. We could choose different filters as well. So we've looked at faculty, the study area. We're able to connect, because we're able to identify the students confidentially. We're able to identify which program they are studying with us here at UQ. We are able to look at the stage that the students are in, so whether they're commencing or concluding, the level of the program, whether it's undergraduate, postgraduate, and then the student's citizenship. We could have added other demographics in there as well. We've chosen not to. We've chosen to go with this instead. And that's just at a starting point. And as you can see, there's something like 12,000 comments, 6,298 for best aspects, and 6,089 for needs improvement. We are looking at the 2024 data here, so to the point that I think Lisa and Merlin, you both raised, we're trying to take the most recent data to be able to support our work here at UQ. So if we could go to the next slide. Now, to the team who are managing this one might be tricky. Let me see. I know it's working perfectly. So what we've done is we've scrolled down from what you saw just before, and the exciting part of this is those coloured areas, that heat map that you saw there. We use that to be able to identify an area of interest to us. How did we create the heat map? Well, there's the 5 focus areas that Lisa went through with us, and those 5 focus areas are on the horizontal axis, and the colouring is indicating where either we're having a very strong sense of best aspects or a very strong sense of needs improvements. And so that allows us to be able to drill down visually into a faculty. So we've done, if you have a look at where it says filters now at the top there, it says faculty, study area, program, etc. We've changed the name of our faculties and study areas there, but we have drilled down using that heat map into an area that's of interest to us that we would like to explore the comments from the students. And you would have seen in the video that was quite a quick process. We've stored all of the comments from the university there, and it is that quick. So now we can drill down further and look down at the individual program, and now we can also look at whether we're looking at commencing or concluding students. So that's pretty exciting to be able to drill down. Let's move on to the broad coding analysis. So next slide, please. So drilling into this being so quick, so easy to drill down into the comments you want is a really important piece. And the visualisation with the colour coding is important as well, because we're visual people. It helps us to be able to define, geez, where are the areas that I'm most concerned about as a senior leader in the university. But the next thing we need is that broad coding analysis where we can identify what it is that our students are actually saying about us. So if we move to the next slide, what we have now is this subtopic analysis. I think if you click on that, yes, it is moving. We've now got these bar plots. And you'll see that just there, we've got teaching quality shown just now. It's moving to skills development. And then there's the student support and services. And for each, what you see on the left-hand side, based on the questions in QILT, we've identified some subtopics. And for each of the subtopics, what we're doing here is we're counting the number of comments that are saying either needs improvement or the number of comments that are saying is the best aspects. So in this particular case, for this particular faculty, study area and program, I'm seeing that academic support is getting some of the strongest, best aspects in the student support and services area. What I'm seeing though in terms of the comments for career support is a lot of students saying consistently, hey, we've got a bit of an issue here. This isn't working well for us. So this is a good start, but it still doesn't drill down enough to be able to help us identify what are the details and what are the students actually saying. So to give you some examples with what we've done with this data, and just before we move to the next slide, we've identified, for example, in one of our programs, which is nursing, that one of the key issues for our concluding students has been the advice that we've been giving to them about placement. We haven't been giving them that clear advice. We wouldn't have been able to get that information from the quantitative data, but by drilling into this and then to the next slide, as I'll show you in a second, we've been able to pick out that as a common theme. By comparison with our program in medicine, for our commencing students, our students are finding that the course advice is really, really confusing. And so we've asked our Faculty of Health, Medicine, Behavioural Science to look at both of those programs based on this data that we're seeing here. But let's go to the next slide and let's go into that detailed data capture. This is the information, I think, that we probably want to be able to see directly from our students. So we'll go to the next slide and let's have a look at that. So this is how we show our data. Now you're looking just at the best aspects here on this one. You can see that we can save the table as Excel. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about the design of what we've done here. First, you'll remember from the previous slide, we've got those subtopics. So from those subtopics, we're able to drill down and identify if there's a particular subtopic of interest to us. We're able also to be able to drill down into particular keywords if we think that there are some keywords that are being of interest to us. The order of the comments that you see there is from the longest comment to the shortest. And is there a way for the team behind the scenes to go back a slide and then forwards back to this slide so we can see the video again? If that's possible, that'd be great. What you can see at the top there is the top 10 subtopics has been chosen, but we've got a way of being able to adjust how many subtopics we would like to explore. So we can make a decision. We do have a percentage of the students who have contributed to that subtopic. That doesn't add up to 100%. It just says out of all of the comments, this number of students, this percentage of students have made a comment about this. This is great. We've been able to drill down to a particular program we've been able to get the student comments and we're able to get it into the hands of the people who are able to make change, which is fantastic. We're able to look at the areas where the students are finding the best aspects, which is good, but we're also able to find out those areas where there is most need of change. For me, it was not quite enough for a number of reasons. Let's go to the next slide so I can talk about those. So there's still a lot of work to do in being able to codify those comments. So we've been able to drill down, get to the comments for a particular school or faculty, but we haven't been able to consistently codify what we're finding. However, we've got an opportunity now to be able to do that with large language models, which can do a few things. We've been playing around with this. The first thing it can do is absolutely summarise what we're seeing from the students. And you can still validate that by having all of the comments associated with the drill down that you've had to be able to compare and contrast what the artificial intelligence is telling us. But the second thing that we're able to do in the summaries there is make recommendations. What does the system think we should do next? So let's have a look and see what that looks like. If we go to the next slide. So now to this summary page, you can choose the number of subtopics that were in the best aspects, the number of subtopics in the needs improvements, and that drill down that was created both in the overview, subtopic analysis, etc., that's maintained all the way through. So we're still talking about that particular cohort of students. Now we've got two buttons. Simple idea here. The one in the middle is an AI summary and recommendations, and as I say, that is we've got an API to connect to an AI large language model that is managed within the UQ environment and doesn't learn from the student comments. The second is we're able to download the reports, and those reports then provide two things, and you'll see them in just a second. The first is either a Word or PDF so that you can share with colleagues what the large language model is informing you of. The second is all of those comments that have contributed to that, both in terms of the best aspects and the needs improvement, so you can validate some of the feedback that you're getting and the advice that the AI is providing. Let's have a look at that in action if we go to the next slide. So you can see we can adjust the number of subtopics that we would like to consider for the AI. We click the button, and now I'm cheating slightly because we've paused the video there. It takes about a minute to be able to summarise the information that we've got from the students. And then we're able to download the reports. But let's go to the next slide. And the next slide starts going through some of the things online that it's providing. So we've got the best aspects, and see how it's highlighting, for example, it had the peer collaboration, etc. there. It had the aspects in needs of improvement. We've also highlighted those sections where we've got some students saying it's the best aspects and some students saying, hey, there's some need of improvement here. Where there's a little bit of difference, that's starting to tell us that different cohorts of students in a particular program, a particular course perhaps, are having different experiences that needs to be drilled down and understood. With the summary, we have asked the program to be able to identify 3 priority strategies that it would recommend, and we have connected that through to our policies and procedures across UQ. So the hyperlinks that you see there in blue, they work. We're also looking at being able to connect this to pedagogical advice, so to be able to train the large language model to use correct terminology and some good references as to why we're recommending these top 3 priorities. So in this particular case, it does talk about enhancing curriculum relevance and industry alignment, and there's some questions just there about the review, etc. you would be able to then look at the particular comments there. In most cases, you would be saying, let's get a focus group of students and do that work as the first step so that we get more data so we understand. If we go to the next slide. So some of the things that we do need to do is to ensure that our data, this particular dashboard, we are not sharing that across the university. We're sharing that at the faculty level and with some fairly strict controls as to why we would be sharing that data and who we would share it with. But it does produce these documents which are now consistent. And I think if you click there, there's a few appears that will occur, I'm hoping, on the second side, which are the Word and PDF documents that appear. So they are now consistently created so that we can share that information with people across the university and start the discussion on what we should do to be able to adjust and respond to the student's experience. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, there they are. Keep going, next one more. And so that's that consistency just there. So these reports are automatically generated. So then there's perhaps a more controversial tool that has been added to this. And for me, I think it's important that we do invest across learning and teaching and understand where there are some real pain points for our students in particular disciplines. And so this is sort of the one more, the one more thing that we have only just put in place. And it's a program pulse check. And the intent behind this is to be able to identify those programs across UQ within each faculty that are doing the very best, and those programs across UQ where they are in most need of some improvement. And the intent here, as I say, is to say, how do we invest to respond in a targeted fashion to where our students are most seeing some concerns. So if we go to the next slide, this is the program pulse. So in the first slide that I showed you, where you could drill down to a particular program, study area and faculty, this one here does something slightly different. Ultimately, it helps me as a DVCA. So what we have again is perhaps our faculty that's been chosen. We've got the number of comments just there. But now what I'm doing is I'm creating a Z-score. And a Z-score allows us to compare the different programs and to order them based on those that have the highest rankings by the students in terms of their approval versus those that are in most needs of improvement. Now, it is controversial to do this using qualitative data, so it has to be used very carefully, but it can very quickly highlight those extreme programs where we're hearing some either some concerns or we should be celebrating because those programs are doing very well. One of the challenges that we have is for some programs we don't have many comments from the students at all. So not many have commented. And I think, Lisa, I was very excited with the 60% response rate that you've highlighted. And that's certainly a target for me. But what we can do is we can say, let's have a look at those programs in this particular case that have a minimum response of at least 20 comments. And then we're looking at a Z-score threshold when we're seeing something of interest. In this case, it's just been set to 0.5, and we might just show the top 3 programs. We can hit the update rankings just there, move to the next slide, and this is the image that I get. Now, again, I'm looking at, for this particular faculty, I'm looking at their the top 3 programs in terms of those that have the best aspects. You'll see that there's another tab there that would allow me to go to needs improvements. I'm not showing that here, but I can go to that just with one click. And I've got for each of the 5 focus areas in QILT where the positive hotspots are for each of those programs. Now, the exciting part that I can do at this point is I can click one button and I can create 3 reports. And those 3 reports are used in the large language model that informs me for each program what the recommendations are, what the best aspects are, etc. So the reports that you saw before, I'm able to create them. The important part for me is that means within a few minutes of my time, as soon as the data lands, I'm not just looking at the quantitative data now. Now I can look at the qualitative data. I can create this information very, very quickly, and I can start looking at those programs where I'd like to understand a bit more, where I'd like to learn from, and where we need to invest in to be able to support our students, hearing directly from the student's voice. So thank you. If we could go to the next slide. So I'm well known for my sayings, and one saying that I have created is no dashboard without a process, and the exclamation mark is absolutely there too. The number of dashboards that we can create at university is remarkable, and then they fall out of fashion. They don't get used as best as they could. So what I have said for this particular dashboard is it has to be connected with our current processes. We have an annualised process of ensuring that our courses and programs are maintained at an appropriate level. And I'd like to share that with you. So if we just go to the next slide. And I think if we click down, I've got some things appearing, sorry. So we call it AQA, our Academic Quality Assurance. If you have a look at AQA, if you're interested, just on Google, the image that you see on the right-hand side is in a publicly available PDF of our approach that we take. So if others would like to have a look at that, please feel free. But we have a review of our programs and courses. They've been based on our student academic success, the assessment design. I'm going to talk about student feedback in a second, and the program and course sustainability from a financial sustainability perspective. And then on the right-hand side, you can see we put dates to these when we're supporting our faculties, but we have an annualised process. This dashboard is now coming into this process, and we are saying, look, we are expecting to have feedback from our faculties for each of the programs that we might flag as having some concerns based on the student feedback, so that we can work on that effectively. I do have an asterisk next to student feedback. We haven't been using QILT data as best as we could have in the AQA approach. And that again is, as I say, there's some questions about the whether it's statistically significant when we drill down to that. But Richard, your presentation earlier on Monash's SETU, we've got a similar process here called CCAT. It's not the only approach by any stretch, but we do incorporate our CCAT results. And I think that there's been some challenges in really being able to understand what the student feedback has been, both particularly at the program level, but also at the course level there. So the dashboard that I've just gone through is a really important part of our next step forward. Next slide, please. So my last few slides, what have we been doing? Well, we've got these customised reports for programs. We do have these AI-generated summaries. We have been, I should say, we have been testing those with our Associate Deans Academic and asking them to give their feedback. Their feedback has been really positive, that the AI seems to be giving them the information that they need to be able to support their teams, which is fantastic. We're able to link that to relevant policies and procedures, and also pedagogic theory. We've been then created that dashboard or hotspot analysis for our leaders. The next steps, as I said, we've been working on this since January, so we're just integrating it into AQA just now. And in particular, as I say, no dashboard without a process, because otherwise it's a beautiful thing that never gets maintained and it falls apart. Next slide, please. So What I have shown, though, I'm sure that colleagues online and in the room will say, look, there's some challenges that they have, because I'm drilling straight down into a program. There's also some other issues that we have. So this is sort of our next steps of what we're now investing in to be able to extend our dashboard further. The first is longitudinal analysis. We want to be able to understand if the current group of students is saying something different to prior students at the particular program level, and that's going to help us enormously when we're identifying, okay, we've been working with faculties and schools to update our processes. I gave the example of nursing just before with the advice that we're giving when it comes to placement. We can have a look then with the longitudinal analysis and see whether the investment in time that's taken place has made an impact. Do we have the next generation of students saying, actually, we're a little bit, or they're not commenting as much, so they're a little happier with that? That would just be one aspect. The other question, of course, is whether something, a comment from students or a general theme from students hasn't been changing over time. And that's important too, just to be able to identify what our priorities are going to be when we're responding to student comments. The controversial part, I think, in some ways, is the fact that we have gone straight down to the academic program and asked, well, is there an issue just there? We're not looking at the central contributions to the student experience. And so that's the next part that we're doing as well. And that's going to adjust the way that we explore the demographics of the students. So here we will be looking at students who do let us know that they have a disability. We will be looking at students from a low SES background, international and domestic, first in family, etc., and looking at the central contributions of the student experience as has been developed and we understand from the comments that the students are providing us. And it's important that we do that work. The schools and faculties, they're not able to be able to make all the changes in the world, and there's quite a few changes that they would love to see made, but they're reliant on a central area to be able to make that change for us, to be able to support all students. So this is the important next step that we're doing. And then the last part that we are looking at is a whole of university outcomes to see what consistency do we have across similar programs, but then across the university as a whole. So they're the three parts that we're doing next. And I think with that, if we go to the next slide, I am very happy to take any questions that people might have. And as I said, I'd be delighted to share the presentation. Thank you.
That was absolutely superb, Chris. You couldn't see, but everyone's eyes were absolutely glued on the stage. People were, it was so easy to follow. I just, first of all, want to thank the AV team who've managed to make that work. Sometimes you guys, if something goes wrong, you must feel bad, but when it goes right, we should acknowledge that worked superbly, and well done to our AV team and my team liaising with it, Mero and people. So thank you for that. The second thing I want, it really worked well, Chris. The second thing is when I was planning this, some of you would have seen a few words I wrote in Future Campus about it, that, these comments, the QILT comments, Chris said, he used to read them, I used to read them. They're where the richness is, and there's a lot of hype around AI, but that is a place where we can use it, and Chris has just demonstrated how it can accelerate and just how a simple, logical, methodical approach. And I just think this is absolutely fantastic. I think also using it where to direct investment in a transparent way is enormously important. And Chris, I'm so grateful for your comment, no dashboard without a process, because we're drowning in dashboards and, if we just link them with existing process, we'll have the right number. So this is fantastic. The other comment I'd like to make on your talk, this is an example. I'm very big on, I think the national benchmark data should be released on the 1st of March. I'm big on that. But that doesn't mean that nothing can be done now. And I think this is why people aren't so obsessed as I am. You can do a lot. You can drill down and find out that in nursing you need to fix the placement strategy and information. You can do that. But the problem is what you can't work out is, if there's a pandemic something and all your nurses say all went down and you've actually gone up, you can't work that out without the national benchmark. So it's a complex issue, but I really don't understand why the national benchmark data isn't released at a set time each year on, say, the 1st of March or whatever date is feasible. Now, there have been some great questions. Chris, I'll just try to run a few out. They keep coming in. Can you share what type of ethical AI did you use? I guess, is it ChatGPT, Copilot, what else? Can you say that?
I'm trying to remember. This is where, as I say, that there's a team behind me. We are using an Amazon tool. But I will say a couple of things on that. The key for me is to make sure that the engine is isolated from the greater world, if you know what I mean, so that we're not sharing data. The engine that you use is interchangeable, so we have wanted to make sure that it's something that's got an API, which means that you can touch a button, just click a button, and we have pre-programmed the request that we're making of the AI engine. So it's the same request regardless of the data set that's available to it. So it's not something where we're typing in or we're talking to it and we're seeing its response and then thinking, oh, I'll refine that a little bit. What we've done is we've done that across a number of our student responses to date, checked that we have a good consistency in that understanding, and then what we've done is we have copied all of that into a simple text file, actually, and that text file is then sent off to the AI engine along with the comments for that particular group of students, and then we ask it to analyse in that consistent way.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. I'm just going to read another. There's one here I'll take as a comment. Absolutely fabulous presentation, really excellent. So that's one of the questions. It was terrific. Someone's asked about hallucinations, idioms, colloquial misunderstandings. Are you finding that? Are you getting any sort of crazy stuff popping up with AI?
No, we haven't. Now, on that though, you would have seen from the responses that we're asking from the AI, we're asking for fairly short 1 sentence, 2 sentence type piece and dot pointed. This is then reducing, I think, the number of hallucinations that we get. We've also been very careful in how we pre-train the AI, so you can pre-train it with information, of course. We've been very, very careful with that. So, yeah. The last part that I would say there, Merlin, is we have not had any hallucinations with the hyperlinks that I showed, and the reason for that is we have been very specific that the AI may use our UQ policies and procedures for hyperlinks, and these are the appropriate ones, but we're not allowing it to go anywhere else.
So that's great. It's wonderful to see this considered, careful approach. Someone's asked, how long did it take for you and your team to do this? You've been pretty quick, actually.
Yeah, been pretty quick. So we started this work in earnest in January. So what you're seeing now is some work's taken us till July. We were preparing for the 2024 data and ingested that. What's taken us the longest, actually, in some ways, has been our own systems, to be honest, rather than the building of this one. In as much as we've got a data lake at UQ, it's superb, but the detail of how you access that and make sure that that's consistently accessed has been a little bit of a problem. So some of those IT gremlins that come in, that slowed us down, I would say, by about 12 weeks by comparison to the speed that we thought we'd be able to go at. The work around identifying that broad brush coding and then the more detailed coding and the consideration of how we wanted to present the data, that would have taken about 2 or 3 weeks. One of the things, though, is I'm sure that if there are, I really don't see the point in every university having to rebuild this from scratch. Genuine offer if there are universities like to talk to us about how we did it, if we can share something with them. We all have QILT to do. We all want to help our students. We'd be happy to share.
That's fantastic, Chris. It's wonderful to know. I'll just take one last question here. There's a few more, but I'll just take one last. Who do you give access to the dashboard, and how do you ensure that the reports generated actions, that there are changes, action from the insights that come out of these automatic reports? And who has access to the dashboard?
Yeah, so good pair of questions there. So two, in a sense. Our Associate Deans Academic have access to the dashboard. We've held that pretty tight. Within each school, we do have Directors of Teaching and Learning, of course, as well. And we are looking at how we can best train them on how they can access the data. We haven't created as yet, we could, but we haven't so far, a cascading or a level of read access. What I mean by that is, does a Director of Teaching and Learning only get to see their faculty or their school? This goes back to your earlier question, Merlin. Basically, we've been in a hurry to be able to get this data and have a look at what our students are saying. So we haven't sort of slowed down to create that type of complexity into the system. Now that we've got it up and running, that's something certainly that we could do. In terms of how do we ensure that there is a process when we have that return loop in a governance sense, absolutely that is with our academic quality assurance program, so our AQA program, and our faculties do. So the way that it works is we identify a series of courses and programs that we're concerned with that we'd like to identify across the university. Our Associate Deans Academic then break that up and pass that information down to the schools. Schools provide feedback to the ADAs of the work that they are doing, have been doing, and then that is collated into the faculty level, and that's brought back to myself and my colleagues for our review. There is a potential to change this very slightly, I think, when we're looking at those particular programs where students are saying that they're most unhappy, for example, and we need to urgently invest alongside a faculty. And we just need to, as I said, that's just a couple of days old, that last image that I showed you. And so I think we are going to have to look at our governance approaches and our timeline approaches to make sure that we're as responsive as quickly as we can for those cases, whilst also being mindful that when people are seeing information that is disappointing to them, the worst thing potentially that can happen is to have a senior leader of the university ask them to fix it now. It's much better to have a more staid approach with that. And as again, I'll just repeat Lisa's words, if you need a focus group with your students, that's probably the first step.
So that's really good too, because I do think, yeah, the relationship between the centre of the university and where all the work is done out in the faculties and schools, it has to be managed carefully, and one certainly doesn't want sort of the abuse of data. I think it's very interesting to me. I think the other thought I have, reflecting at my whole time at higher education, when I started as a lecturer, I had a piece of chalk, and all my teaching was fairly personal. I paid attention to the student feedback after my own lectures and pracs, but it was very hard to get the university level. But then the research metrics sort of came, and the research side of the university, DVC's research and Associate Dean's research, and directors of research in schools would get together and discuss strengths and weaknesses and where they would invest, where they would fix things. But in the education space, it was harder. There was a great community, but it was less visible. Now, the role of DVC education, Associate Dean's education, there's a question. We've got a wonderful Dean, Associate Dean Education, Alison Beavis, who's a master of dashboards and data. And there's so much work and value can be added at the Deputy Vice-Chancellor level, the Associate Dean level, the Director of Teaching in schools. We have education-focused staff at UNSW, Nexus Fellows. There's so much we can share and learn from each other. I think it's a great age for teaching. And this also sets the balance, because as a university, we have to create knowledge and pass the knowledge on, and we have to get the balance that we're here for our students, but we're also interested in creating new knowledge and get the investment right. And all of these things, I think, will be helped the more information we have. So look, I'm going to close off. The people online won't know, but an aroma of food has permeated through Leighton Hall, and it's making me hungry. So we are going to break for lunch. I'm just going to do two things. I'm going to just let you know that at 2 o'clock, the New South Wales Higher Education Summit will be launched. So we'll have lunch until 2 o'clock. So that is an initiative of Professor Patsy Polly, who's the director of the Scientific Education Academy. When we were trying to boost the profile of education at UNSW, we did a number of things, and one was to identify the sort of 20 or 30 most respected people who were most respected for their impact on education and the student experience. So there was a few from each faculty. And we grouped them together into a community called the Scientific Education Academy. And one of the things that Patsy's done is said, well, we should have an annual day, and the higher education under Sarah Madison, their DVC Education and Student Experience, and they've got together and decided that this year's summit would be on the same day as the QILT Symposium. It would be the afternoon, and it would be about student well-being. So I just want to congratulate Patsy for the work she's done in that leadership, and Sarah Madison and her team, and encourage you, once you've had your lunch, do all your networking after lunch, and then come back at 2 o'clock. And if you're online, you can make yourself a sandwich and come back at 2 o'clock. Our lunch is quite delicious by the smell of it. The other thing I want to do is thank everyone, all the speakers this morning, all the visitors. Chris, I mean, just everyone has been paying attention because they've been terrific talks, and I think us talking about the student experience is the first step on the road to making it even better. And there are things that we can improve, and having information is always better than acting in ignorance. So thanks everyone for their contributions, and please enjoy the lunch.